Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the Canby City Council regular meeting for, gosh, it is September 2nd of 2020. What a wild 2020 it has been. We've got a full agenda this evening, and so we're going to get right into it. So thank you all for being here. We've got a number of guests this evening that we will bring up and talk about shortly. Start off, we will move into communications. Mr. Lindsay, how are you?
Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we have some items to communicate, but if we have this many people here to do a presentation, perhaps the council would indulge listening to reports at the end so that I could cover a few items. A few of them can be covered as we talk about them because they're second readings, and then the big one is the quiet zone, and I think that merits a larger discussion. So instead of having guests wait, could we talk about it at the end?
Well, I appreciate that. We'll put that later in the agenda back under City Administrator, Business and Staff Reports. Will that work, Joe?
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
The one communication that I might give that will take just a short amount of time.
Okay.
Is that today was Amanda Cyber's last day. She is leaving to pursue or let her husband pursue his career in broadcasting down in Arizona. So, and I believe he has accepted his job. And so she did a nice job for us here in the city for over 13 years. And she was able to make it this far. And then she is now moving on to Arizona and sunnier weather. And so we're all a little jealous of that. And we're happy for her and wish her well.
Well, appreciate that, Joe. And I'll talk more about that when we get to Mayor's business. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. We will move into item 3, which is citizen input and community announcements. Ms. Bissett, do we have anybody wishing to address the council regarding non-agenda items under citizen input tonight?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any community announcements this evening?
There are none.
Okay, perfect. Well, then that brings us to our presentation this evening on the tolling project for I-205. This evening, we've got Miss Lucinda Broussard and her team to take us through what we've been kind of been updating you all on here the last couple of months regarding the tolling project and discussion on I-205 and what that's going to look like coming up. So Lucinda, I appreciate you and your team being here this evening to present this to us and bring us up to speed on this project, where it's at and kind of where it's heading. So I will hand it over to you and your group. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and thank you for allowing us to, spend this time with you this evening. Next slide, please. So we're just going to our agenda's pretty light. We probably have some deep information to talk about, but only a few subjects. So we're going to get right into it. Next one, please. And the next one. So I kind of just want to come back to the beginning of how we got here. There was a House Bill 2017. After that, value pricing feasibility analysis was done. That happened for about a year and a half or a year and a couple of months. But what came out of it was tolling was part of what House Bill 2017 said, you go do tolling, but it was big. It said I-205 and I-5, but the value pricing feasibility analysis and the committee that came up with this, they took that big concept and they said, where would that tolling be? So the recommendation was I-205 from Stafford Road to OR 213 and I-5 from North Going Street to Multnomah Boulevard. So both projects. Matt's going to talk some about the alternatives that we have for I-205. Jennifer's going to talk about the National Environmental Policy Act, and what we're into right now. But one of the things I want to say that we heard these things, I wasn't here back then, but I still heard them when I first came here too. And so we've been carrying them with us. How we would handle low income communities, what about transit, mostly in the Clackamas County area, and also diversion. And Matt will get more into the diversion piece of this. Next slide, please. So here's schedule we're looking at right now, and we're starting the National Environmental Policy Act. You'll hear it called NEPA. We'll call it the Environmental Review Process. Same name, many different names for the same process. And right now we're at that pre-environmental review stage where we're out asking for your comments for what we're going to take into the environmental review process. And that's what Matt's going to talk to you about, those alternatives. Jennifer's going to talk to you about the goals and objectives and the purpose and need. And it's all in draft. And I can't say that enough. Your comments help us shape what goes into it. This is our draft, our recommendations, but is not in any way final. That is why we're out talking to people and asking for your comments. So top line, the red is that environmental review process I was just talking about. Second line is the I-205, the improvements. We have money for the design, which we are doing now. We're at 60% design. When it's that light blue, as we go into that light blue area, there is no money for construction at this point. I-5, we're gonna hit it just a little, just to say, yes, we're working on it. We're in a pre-environmental review process where we'll be going out and taking the I-5, doing the alternatives, kind of what we did for 205, and coming back and asking about that. And then that bottom pink, equity, which is what we're doing throughout this whole program. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. There's the next slide talking about equity. So when the feasibility analysis was done, the first thing was equity for low income. And it was really low, how are you going to handle low income communities? And technically equity is not just low income. It could be racial, social, disability, all equity. So we have actually taken that all equity view. We've convened an equity and mobility advisory committee, which I talked about would go through these whole processes with us. But one of the things they're doing is they're taking an equity framework and they're laying it on top of the toll program, because there's no baseline for what equity is. And that's basically what we're going to come up with for the Oregon toll program, is what is equity and how do you apply it. So that group will be doing that. They've met 3 times. They're having their 4th meeting. I believe it's September 29th. But they'll be talking about how do you put equity into the toll program? And we're not just talking about for low income, but for others also. So it's to bring out those voices that we normally don't hear and we probably don't really reach out to, which are the underrepresented and underserved communities that we have in Oregon. Next slide, please. Here's our Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. In June, we just did a listening session, and it was basically about what's going on around the nation and in the state. It had nothing to do with tolls. Besides, do you think tolls could be equitable was one of the questions. And a few members said no, but the majority said yes. And they have been working towards that since this meeting. But this was a great meeting to hear what's going on, how transportation has affected different communities in Oregon and throughout the nation. So it was just a wonderful conversation. It is online. We did record it, and you can get to it through our OregonTolling.org. Next slide, please. So some updates. We've been going around to, I will say, and Jennifer will talk about the 45-day comment period, which started August 3rd. We've been out talking to anyone who'll listen to us, not only about our program, but about the comment period and about all the draft items we're going to talk about tonight. As I said, they are not in stone. We also have a monthly e-newsletter that we put out. We have the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. We're also doing our regional modeling group, which we did the data share in July, which was which Matt will talk about the alternatives that we came up with in the analysis. We shared all of that information with our regional partners. That's the picture you see here from Portland Metro area and Southwest Washington. Anybody who wanted it, we were willing to give it to you. We kind of did a timeshare ideal where we, sat you down and told you everything we did with it, and then we turned it over. So we are busy and out trying to make sure that we're not, we are open about what we're doing in this program. Next slide, please. So as I said, we've heard a few things these last few years. This is during the value pricing. But even as we hear things now, I think that first one is one we're working on with the Transportation Commission, which is they'll be, they must be implemented equitably, which I talked about the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, but it's that second part, where and how revenue is used. So I was at the Transportation Commission last month and will be back this month to get a decision on revenue collected on a corridor stays on a corridor. And that's the revenue after all the bills are paid. I call it the residual. So it's not net, it's not gross, it's right after net. So whatever's left would stay on that corridor. And that is what the Transportation Commission will be deciding in this September meeting. The other ones we talked about, mostly the three that we keep highlighting, the income, the transit, and diversion. Next slide, please. One of the things that folks say, and I even say, people ask you for your comments, but my thing is, what are you going to do with it? And thinking about how I think about it, we're like, what are you going to do with it? And can you tell somebody what you did with it? So this is kind of our feedback loop, showing that we're taking in the comments, but we'll also be posting what we did with them. If we answered them, if we moved them along, whatever we did with them, we'll post. So you'll know what happened with your comments. Next slide, please. Jennifer, thank you.
Me. All right, so moving along here, as Lucinda mentioned, we are working on the I-205 NEPA, the environmental review process. So just before we jump into that, the section of I-205 that we're looking at is based on the value pricing feasibility analysis, and the project limits run from Stafford Road to Oregon 213, with the idea being that we're tolling on or near the Abernathy Bridge. So here is kind of a milestone schedule for the environmental review process. We are over here in 2020, just getting started. We are working on defining what the alternatives are that we'll take into the environmental review process and the purpose and need statement. So that's what we're working on now, looking for input before those get finalized and we start doing all the technical analysis. We would be aiming to publish the draft environmental assessment about a year from now, towards the end of 2021, and then the final environmental assessment would be in 2022. And across the bottom of this, you can see we have a series of public open houses. Right now, they've all been virtual, but hopefully between now and 2022, we'll have the chance to move back to in-person events. And even in between these open houses, we'll continue to provide information on the website and through briefings and updates. We want everybody to stay in the loop and know what's going on. So right now we are in a 45-day public comment period, as Lucinda mentioned. It goes through September 16th, so we have 2.5 more weeks before that closes. Actually, I guess about 2 weeks exactly. We are specifically looking for input on the alternatives that are going forward and the purpose and need statement, and I'm going to share kind of a bullet point summary of that here in just a second. So what is a purpose and need statement? In NEPA terms, the purpose statement is basically a summary of what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and it's used to identify the range of alternatives we can look at. If something doesn't meet that purpose statement, if it doesn't solve your critical problem, then we don't carry it forward and look at it further. And beyond that, we've also identified goals and objectives, which are the things beyond the purpose statement that we would like to do with the project. And so those can be used to evaluate how one alternative does versus another. So for this project, we have 2 purposes identified. One is managing congestion on the corridor, and the other is generating revenue. So our little graphic dial down here at the bottom is identifying that we would aim to have a toll rate that does both of those things. And the toll rate won't be set until later. It'll be set by the Oregon Transportation Commission. But that's the project purpose has two parts to it here. The need for the project is regional congestion and growth, as well as this particular area to I-205 experiences a lot of congestion each day, more than 6 hours. The blue highlighted here and on the next slide are things that were added as we were developing this. We didn't develop it in a vacuum. We've been talking to our partners. We went back to things that came out of the value pricing feasibility analysis. We have working groups. So we've been asking for input as we've been building the series of bullet points, and these are some of the things that were added along the way in the blue. And we will continue as we get the comments during this comment period to incorporate those in here. So the other part of the need is the funding. The gas tax is not keeping pace with the need. This is a summary of our goals and objectives. The full-blown purpose and need statement and goals and objectives is available on the project website. I'm not going to read all of these, but just I'll highlight the goals, which are the ones in bold. As Lucinda mentioned, we are trying to put equity at the forefront of this project. So that is our first goal, is to provide equitable benefits to all users. Diversion or rerouting, which Lucinda also highlighted, is our second goal. We want to limit additional diversion along the corridor as a result of tolling. We want to support safe travel for all modes. We want to work on improving air quality and climate change. We want to support multimodal transportation choices, support regional economic growth and travel demand management. And then we also want to think about making a system that can be integrated with other toll systems so they can work seamlessly together, and interoperability with other pieces of the transportation system, such as parking. So that's a summary of our goals and objectives and what we're looking for comments on right now. And then Matt is going to talk about the alternatives, which is another piece of what we're seeking comments on during this 45-day window.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I'm going to run through the alternatives and also talk through some of the technical analysis that's gone into the project at this point. Next slide, please. So before I jump into all that, I'm just going to talk about the overall process for this analysis and kind of where we're at in the big picture. So Lucinda mentioned the feasibility analysis. So that looked at the regional project and tolling up and down I-5 and I-205. The piece of that that came forward for I-205 in this area was called Concept E, and it was found to be able to achieve that purpose that Jennifer talked about, congestion management and revenue generation on I-205. At this point, we're kind of taking a step back from that, and we have that core concept from the feasibility analysis, and we're looking at different toll configurations, different structures, to see if they could have better outcomes in those goals and objectives that Jennifer mentioned. We're comparing these 5 alternatives against each other to see which ones could advance for further study, more detailed study, and an environmental review. So we're hoping to go from these 5 alternatives down to 2 or 3. So the environmental review, that's where we'll get into the really detailed. I'm going to take off my headset because I'm hearing some distortion.
Y'all hear me better now? Okay, good. All right, so the environmental review, we'll get into a lot more detail compared to where we're at right now. Right now, we're doing a preliminary look. We're really leaning on the Metro Regional Travel Demand Model tool, and that preliminary look gives us good information, enough to kind of filter through, but not all the detailed information where we want to be looking at 2040, and we want to be looking at specific locations that could be impacted by rerouting, and we will want to look at equity impacts and those much broader criteria than we have right now. Obviously, eventually, we're looking to get to one preferred alternative for implementation, and that will be a project that will be refined based on those 2 or 3 alternatives to address any mitigation impacts that may happen off of I-205, and once those are identified in the environmental. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have 5 alternatives that we're looking at right now. So the first one, again, came from that feasibility analysis. That's just a toll on the Abernathy Bridge, single location, a point toll. That's easy to understand, and compared to some of these other alternatives, it's relatively easy to implement. However, it's one toll at one location, and we saw a concentrated rerouting impact through Oregon City, through downtown and across the Oregon City Arch Bridge in that alternative. We came up with alternative 2, which really is a refinement of alternative 1, very similar, but also limits some of the rerouting of through trips on I-205 by placing gantries on either side of the bridge. Our third alternative is where we kind of split the toll between 2 different locations. So there's the one over the Abernathy Bridge over the Willamette River, and then the I-205 bridges over the Tuolumne River. It's really, for a through trip, just passing through on I-205 is essentially the same. But for a local access trip that's getting on or off of I-205 in Westland or Oregon City, you could pay half the toll amount. So it's split between those 2 locations. Alternative 4 just advances that same idea of splitting the toll between locations for all 4 of the segments of I-205 between Stafford Road and Oregon 213. Alternative 5 also goes from Stafford Road to Oregon 213, but that's a single zone toll. So you pay the same amount regardless of how far you travel on I-205, whereas in alternative 4, you're kind of paying, the more you travel on through the tolled segment, the more you'd pay. Next slide, please. So this is just a graphic of the same concept. So upper left, you've got the single point toll on the bridge. Lower left, you split the toll between the 2 locations. And these orange areas are the segments of I-205 that would see a toll. Those little blue icons, it's kind of hard to see on here, are where we could potentially have gantries located. Alternative 4 on the upper right, like I said, the 4 segments, each of the 4 segments between Stafford Road and Oregon 213, kind of pay as you go. And then alternative 5, the whole thing, regardless of how much you use, at each of these entry points, you'd pay the same toll. Next slide, please. So for this screening alternatives analysis, we identified a list of performance measures to evaluate these things. So these are still pretty high level at this point. It's not the full list that we would do in the environmental assessment, but they tell us some interesting information. So the first one's about transportation system demand, how many cars are on the road and how many miles they travel on the system and how much time they spend on the system. Then there's the I-205 traffic volume, how many cars are on I-205 in each of these alternatives. And then we look at diversion effects, how many cars would be on roadways off of I-205, the diversion off of I-205 and how it affects the surrounding system. And then as well, what kind of shift there might be to shared ride or transit travel. We also have several cost and revenue measures, the key one there being the net toll revenue that are available to fund other projects. And then we have qualitative criteria in terms of implementation and operations. How easy is this to implement? How flexible is it to handle long-term congestion management? How scalable is it to that future tolling system that was identified in the value pricing feasibility analysis? Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with some of our kind of model results on I-205 itself. That's kind of where it started from. Again, we're looking at the 27 regional travel demand model. And what we're seeing is that there is diversion, a decrease in volume off of I-205 across these different scenarios, generally ranging between 15 and 35% on the tolled segments. Couple of important points to note about that. The diversion is significantly worse in the off-peak hours than on the peak hours when there's congestion, not only on I-205 currently, but in the surrounding system as well. It's also important to note that while these are pretty significant percentages on the tolled segments, immediately outside of the tolled segments, that number decreases significantly. So 10 to 20% between Stafford I-5 and Stafford Road interchange, and 5 to 10% north of 82nd Drive near Gladstone. So that's important for considering kind of the overall regional diversion and rerouting perspective. Next slide, please. Okay, so I talked about that volume decrease on I-205. So we're calling that diversion. Right? So where does all that traffic go? Some of it is going to reroute to other roadways. So that could be on the regional system, or it could be local and in near that tolled area. Not all of it is just going to take a different route. Some of it is there's going to be some changes in travel behavior. People can because we have a variable toll rate over the course of the day, people can choose to leave at a different time. They can go to a different location, and they can change how they get there. They might share a ride or take a bus. We have an early snapshot of how that might change from these early modeling results. So the model results do show a potential for a reduction in people driving alone. The shift is primarily towards shared ride trips, about 4,000 to 5,000 additional shared ride trips in a day. And then some potential for a shift from people driving alone to taking transit. That's a relatively small shift, fewer than 500 trips per day using the current assumptions we have. These shifts are evident across all of our alternatives. Next slide, please. And in terms of the overall transportation system, we see reductions in vehicle miles traveled in all these alternatives. We see reduction in vehicle hours traveled. So that means people are driving fewer miles on our roads, fewer cars on the roads, and spending less time driving in cars. So that's a good benefit to the system. But there's an important consideration here that some of that, even with the overall shift, there is a decrease on the non-freeway system. So most of that decrease is happening on the freeway system. And again, similar to the changes in volume on I-205, we're seeing more of a shift happening overall in these off-peak hours than on the peak hours. In the grand scheme of things, in terms of regional, it's a relatively small shift, but closer to the study area, it could be certainly noticeable specific areas that we need to look at in more detail. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the rerouting effects, the changes in volumes on other roadways beyond I-205. So the first one is I-5. I think it's logical to say, okay, you're going to put a toll on I-205, people are going to jump over to I-5. We're seeing some of that, but not as much as we might think initially. So we're seeing 0 to 2%, a few locations closer to the southern part of Portland, we might see 2 to 5%. Real close to I-205, we're actually seeing potential for a small decrease on I-5 as fewer people look to route to 205. Again, these shifts can be are significantly lower during the peak hours. They're pretty much negligible when during the peak hours when I-5 is already congested. Next slide, please. Getting closer to the tolled area, things start getting a little more interesting, particularly for this community. So in Lake Oswego, we see a potential for a 5 to 10% increase across all these different alternatives. In Stafford Road, south of I-205, we see the potential for a volume decrease. Again, fewer cars looking to access I-205 can result in a volume decrease. In Oregon 99E in downtown Canby, we see the potential for a significant increase in volume over the course of the day. 30 to 40%, some of our alternatives. And again, same kind of story. This is largely being driven by off-peak volumes more so than peak hour volumes. But this is clearly that this potential rerouting pattern is there, and we need to look further into it. Next slide, please. So rerouting analysis, obviously a critical consideration of the project. We talked about it in the goals. So, we need to do more analysis on this. We're still taking a preliminary look. So in the feasibility analysis, we just took a very high level look at the concepts, and we said, you know, this roadways might be impacted, and Oregon 9090 was one of those identified. In this level, screening alternatives analysis, we're identifying the scale of potential volume increases, identifying the key locations where it might occur, and we're identifying how it might change over the course of the day and in the peak and off-peak hours. In the environmental assessment, that's where we really need to identify what are the impacts on specific locations due to these patterns. What happens during the peak hours when there are mobility standards that need to be met, and if there's an impact due to rerouting, what kind of mitigations are needed to continue to meet those mobility standards. So that's what's coming in the environmental assessment to take the analysis to that next level. Next slide, please. So I talked about those performance criteria that we've identified for these alternatives. So we went through those and then did kind of a very high level summary of those. There's a lot more detailed information in the screening alternative analysis report available online, but this is a high level look. And again, we're comparing each of these 5 alternatives against each other to figure out which ones perform the there's no build scenario in this, but in the environmental assessment, the no build or no toll scenario will be one of the scenarios considered. Again, at this point, we're trying to come up with a better alternative to take forward. So all of this kind of analysis that you're seeing here is driving us towards the next slide, which is the recommendations for further study in the environmental assessment. So again, we're looking to take these 5, get down to 2 or 3 for more detailed study. And the ones we've recommended at this point, and we're going out to hear everybody's perspective on it and hoping to hear more, is alternatives 3 and 4. So again, alternative 3 was the one that split the tolls between the bridges. So the segment east of Stafford Road and the segment over the Abernathy Bridge. This one really had overall better performance than alternative 1 and helped to reduce that concentrated rerouting effect that we saw through Oregon City and alternative 1. Alternative 4 was another alternative that we recommended for further study. It kind of has the maximum flexibility for the long term. So having 4 different locations or the toll gives you the best ability to manage traffic congestion in the long run. And compared to alternative 5, had less of a concentrated rerouting effect. Alternative 5 had some good regional performance showing up, but it also had potential for concentrated rerouting effects on the edges of it. So through Gladstone on the east side of the toll zone and through near Borland Road and the west of Willamette Falls Drive near the Stafford Road interchange. So these are all alternatives we've identified at this point, and we hope to hear from you all if in the community, in the region, if this is the right track to go down.
Sorry about that. So thank you, Matt. Thanks, Jennifer. So what's next? Have your say. So again, comment period started on August 3rd. It goes through September 16th. We are looking for your comments. The recommendations that Matt gave you for the alternatives, Jennifer showed you purpose and need statement, and also the goals and objectives. All of those are in draft, and we need the comments to help us get there. We had 3 webinars already. They're online also. You can email us your comments. You can call us with your comments. You can take our survey online. We're really looking for your comments. Next slide, please. Again, thank you. Appreciate your time. And I see we have Heather's name there, but that was Jennifer Raby who helped us this evening. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lucinda. Appreciate it. Matt, Jennifer, also thank you very much. So I can make my screen bigger here. Questions at all for Lucinda and her team, Councilor Parker?
Well, thank you. That was a lot of information, and I appreciate the detail that you went into it. Lucinda, can I make sure that I understand the foundational concepts that we're dealing with here? Why are we here? Why tolling? Is it to generate revenue, or is it to reduce congestion during peak hours?
So it's dual purpose. It's revenue generation and congestion management. And those were, go ahead.
And the revenue will go towards new construction?
As I said, that was one of the things I talked about. I had gone to the Transportation Commission last month and we'll be going back this month about residual, I'm calling it residual revenue. So gross revenue pays for construction and other, debt, anything else we have. Then we have net revenue. We pay for our operations, maintenance, contingencies, and then whatever's left would stay on the corridor to do other projects. And those would have to be, I'm just identifying a bucket of money, not where it goes.
Well, let me just pass along a little bit of history of Clackamas County transportation participation in regional things. A couple of times, Clackamas County has participated in statewide and regional efforts. and we sometimes feel like we didn't get our fair share. So it would be easier for policymakers like me to be able to go back and explain to my constituents, here's what you get out of that. But we can explore that. Secondly, the tolling would be 24 hours a day.
Yes, tolls would be on 24 hours a day, but it would be a variable rate. So it wouldn't be the same price. During peak times, it would be higher to move traffic along. And then off-peak would be lower.
And yet the impact for places like Canby, did I understand you correctly saying that the greatest impact would be during off-peak times, that during the time that it would be cheapest to drive through this tolling area would be the time that more people would take a diversion? Did I hear that right?
Yes, and Matt can talk more about that from this initial analysis. Matt, you still up?
Yeah, that's right. Overall, we're seeing more diversion because the toll rate is variable. And it's even though it's higher during the peak hours, there's a lot more congestion in the overall system and surrounding area. So you get more travel time savings, even though you have a higher toll amount. So some of those off-peak hours, the toll rate is lower, but alternative routes can be more attractive because they might not have as much travel time savings.
Okay, well, I always wonder about the psychology of people, of what we can learn from consultants like you on why I would take an alternative route, even though I would pay less. So thanks very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Spoon?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I think it's really helpful. Lucinda, Matt, and Jennifer, I really appreciate your time and energy in presenting this to us. One of my questions, because I think that from our community perspective, there's a big concern about the impact on 99. I think a lot of our community feels like it's already stressed. You know, it was kind of built for a community that lived here 15 years ago. And so we're growing and expanding, and traffic is getting worse only. So how do you, just for the people that are watching or maybe have concerns that are going to come back later, what's the methodology in determining what that impact is on 99 based on the various scenarios, right? So how do you determine that one is much worse for 99, but one isn't? I mean, in theory, like I think as a community, we're thinking tolling overall has a negative effect on Highway 99, but it appears that some scenarios have a lesser effect than others. So what's the methodology in determining that?
Matt?
Yeah. So again, at this point with the regional modeling, it's a relatively high level look. So we're identifying the scale of it. When we get into the environmental assessment, we'll have to do that detailed analysis, looking at specific locations, specific intersections, what happens to them during the peak hours. So the regional model will be a starting point for that. It'll be an input for that, but we're also developing a more refined model that will include kind of the sub area for I-205. And then on top of that, we then do that location specific analysis. And so that's where what we do at those intersections, when we do get to that detailed traffic analysis, is we figure out what it looks like in the no build scenario and what it looks like in each of these alternatives. And there's a mobility standard defined for all major intersections where it has to meet that performance criteria. And so we compare it to that. We compare it to the no build, we compare it to that minimum performance criteria that it has to meet. And then if it's not doing that, if tolling is creating a rerouting pattern on the intersection, you're going to have to identify some kind of mitigations or improvements at that intersection to handle the additional traffic. So that's kind of the process we have to work through, if that makes sense.
Okay, and maybe I'm a little bit ahead of myself here, but looking at, I don't know if any of you have driven down 99 through Canby, but considering mitigation, it's not a route that has a lot of alternatives. If you get off I-5 and you intend to go to 205 down 99, I mean, there's one path. So if these initial recommendations indicate that there's a high impact on 99 to the citizens of Canby in our area. What might, and maybe I'm just way ahead of myself, and please tell me if I am, what might mitigation look like, and how, you know, how can our community be a part of that once we get past the initial input round, community input round?
Matt?
Sure. So one, the first thing traffic engineers think of when they think of mitigations is bigger intersections. So I don't know if that's a feasible answer or if that's going to work. So that would have to be assessed. Another one is to look at refining the toll concept and how they work and how they're structured. So part of our analysis when we looked at alternative 4, I mentioned how it was kind of flexible, right? And so we can tweak how that alternative works and have it, because it's so flexible, we can have it work better and identify some of the, potentially restructure it to have it not create those same mitigation impacts. So that's another strategy as well. There's probably others I'm not thinking of at this time, but those are the first ones that come to mind about as we go through the environmental. I mean, the first step is identifying what those impacts potentially are. And that's what the environmental assessment will do. And then we'll get into identifying strategies. I'm sort of making up hypothetical ones, right? But yeah, that's the process we go. First, you have to identify the problem, and then you identify the solutions that make sense.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And then the second part of my question is, once we get past this initial phase of community input, if the recommendations are high impact on our community, is there another opportunity for the community to engage as you refine the process and we figure out what the solution is?
Throughout this whole process, we will be engaging the community. So after this 45-day period, we refine what goes into the environmental review process. We'll come back and talk about that before we even start doing that. So there's nothing that we're going to do that can't have some influence on it, because we're actually going to get to a preferred alternative, which means we're going to take 2 or 3 into the environmental review process in the beginning, but we plan on just having 1 towards the end, which means there are more times for refining.
Great. Thank you so much again for all your time and the presentation. It was really helpful, and I think our community will appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Council President Dale. You're muted, sir.
I spend 9 hours a day on Google Meeting and once a week on Zoom. I apologize. Finding the button. Thanks again for the presentation. It was good, very clear. I appreciate it. You have a problem statement and you have a solution statement, right? Your problem statement is that ODOT needs more revenue and we need to reduce congestion, which I think everybody gets. My critique is, especially as a Clackamas County resident and a long time 40-some-year commuter on I-205, is that your problem statement on revenue is not clear. What do you need revenues for, right? Is it for this region? Is it for Clackamas County? Is it because gas tax is down across the state? What do you need revenue for? Where's it going to go to? And I'll be honest with you, you're dealing with a community that has a great deal of skepticism as the real intent. You're dealing with a community that's going to look at your solution, which is the toll 205, as yet another example where Clackamas County is going to bear the cost of funds being diverted to Portland causes or causes in other parts of the state where there's no direct benefit for Clackamas County. When it comes to congestion reduction, I know you're hitting smack into a wall on comments because I've seen them where people are saying, where are the lanes for 205, right? Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that to reduce congestion on 205, you need more lanes. Tolling alone is not going to reduce congestion. It can't. Your own numbers that you showed tonight says that there's very little close in local diversion. That's because there's no alternatives to 205. Borland Road and Willamette Falls Drive are already maxed as they are without tolling. You also, in your presentation very earlier, pointed out that the transit options are lousy. People who would like to use transit from Oregon City have an hour commute today. They go to 3 hours if they're trying to get to Beaverton. The transit just isn't there. So you're talking to an audience that goes, now, wait a minute, you're actually going to make things worse for me. You're going to cost me more money to get to my job and to get home. You're not going to reduce congestion. You're actually going to increase it on what little side alternatives there are. And then you're going to take the money, and you've emphasized 3 times tonight, the residual will go to the corridor. And you got a county going, yeah, right, like there will be a residual. Where's this? We just get the crumbs. Please, sir, might we have more? Where is the money going? Is it going to the CRC? Is it going to fix I-84, I-5? Where is the money for our new lanes? And so I'm not faulting you as presenters, but what I'm saying is this is not a problem statement nor a solution statement that we can sell to Canby residents or Oregon City residents or I-205 commuters. It's not clear at all where the benefit is for us. And people are self-centered, right? I get that. But I just don't see in here where I can give any encouragement at all to my constituents or to our neighboring cities or to I-205 commuters that we're actually going to make the problem better. If you had come to me and said these revenues will first and foremost go to expanding lanes on 205, that's something we can get a hold of. But through this whole presentation, we're not seeing any kind of assurance of that. So I'll listen.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that pointing that out, that we didn't make that clear. So when we showed the one slide where it was paid for through design, but construction was not for the 205 improvements, the tolling revenue would go towards that. That would be part of the tolling revenue to go for construction. And that's just one piece of financing that we could offer for the construction for the improvements on I-205. When we talk about the residual or what's left, that's after that's already paid for, or that's money that's already carved out for that. And then we're talking about the other money, which I said would just stay on the corridor. Didn't say where it would go because we'd have to sit around with all of you and discuss where does that money go, that extra money. But the widening and the seismic would be part of that toll revenue that we would pay down that debt for.
I think to improve your presentation for Clackamas County and regional residents, it needs to be made clear you're going to get more lanes. And if we're not going to get more lanes out of 205, then let's not gloss it over. Let's just be upfront and clear. That's not going to happen.
Oh, no, that is part of the purpose. Part of the financing is to get the additional lane and the seismic retrofit on Abernathy Bridge.
Okay, then let's make that clear, because I've seen this presentation actually 3 times. And
okay, not clear. Okay.
Not clear.
Okay, not a problem. We'll do that. Thank you.
Lucinda, just to back up Council President Dale's comments, I know that, so Clackamas County's put together a kind of the tolling diversion kind of group.
Yes.
And the last meeting that I was at, I was explained was that the tolling piece was that was going to pay for, once we paid for all of the tolling infrastructure to put in, all the different gates and all that stuff that go in there. They're not called gates or something else, but we'll call them. Yeah, sorry. The gantries, is that what we call them?
Gantries, yes.
Right. I get new lingo. I'll catch up to it. I'm used to, I grew up in Ohio where there's turnpikes and you got to go through gates and all that. So throw change into the bucket.
Yep.
Through that conversation with that committee was that once the tolling was implemented, paid for those pieces of that infrastructure, then that money was going to go to diversion, to pay for the diversion pieces, not the added lanes. Is that, did I mishear that correctly? I mean, you're presenting something different, that this is strictly going to, design's been paid for. In fact, the design's done, from what I
Design
understand.
60%,
Okay, we're at
60%.
Okay. And then what's not there is, like you said, the money to actually build out the additional lanes, and that's where the tolling piece comes in.
Yes. So tolling, and we actually spoke to the diversion committee, I think the technical piece of the diversion committee, and we talked about diversion. We talked about diversion from the data share we had done. So just kind of that information. So we didn't speak to the committee, but we did go to the technical committee. The money would be used to pay for the seismic retrofit and the construction of the extra lane and the toll equipment. So the capital cost of all of that would be in that front end of what we're talking about, money for like toll revenue money. And that extra, it's, how did I put it to somebody? You buy a $400 million house and you have to pay your mortgage every month. So we would pay our debts, all of our bills, and then what's left over is the money we're talking about staying on the corridor to pay for something else, because mitigation would be part of the construction. That would be in that construction dollars up front, not on the back end.
Okay. The other piece that came up in conversation was the partnerships with TriMet that obviously need to be enhanced, especially on the Clackamas side. I know it's come up in just about every presentation that you have given about this, to the Clackamas issue of, we don't have a robust bus system with TriMet, and how do we get there with TriMet so that there is alternatives? Because Canby citizens jump on our local transit, connect into Oregon City, hook into TriMet, but as you know, Council President Dale is saying, it's a tough commute, and even harder connecting in that piece. So can you speak to the dialogue maybe with TriMet and what might be occurring at that level with that agency to I guess, be developing alongside it as this is going?
So let me go a little bit wider. We have a transit multimodal group, TriMet's on it, along with partners over in your Clackamas County for sure, and the Portland area, getting together with where's transit at now and what can that look like in the future. That would be part of our mitigation, along with the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, who's going to look at transit also as an arm for, it's another mode of travel for people. So we are TriMet's at the table. I'm trying to, Matt, what are the other transit agencies that sit on the transit multimodal group?
We have a lot of the, well, we have a lot of agency representation, and I think we have the, I apologize, I'm blanking on the name, but we have the kind of the local paratransit service in Oregon City as well. And yeah, representatives from Clackamas County and a lot of the cities around there. You know, this isn't the first time this problem or this issue of limited transit in this corridor has been discussed. This is something these communities have been working on over time. So we're really trying to leverage their expertise and their knowledge as saying, well, here are kind of the deficiencies, and here are projects that, you know, there's projects identified in the regional transportation plan to get at this. And so we're really trying to leverage all the agencies and their current expertise and figure out how it fits into this.
So I just to add, just kind of to bring it together. So Matt, when we're talking to our transit multimodal group and kind of facilitating that, when you're doing the modeling, do you take into account what transit looks like out there? And that's what we're putting into the alternatives once you're doing that deeper dive kind of?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Like at this point, we need a consistent baseline across all these alternatives. So we're making the same assumptions in all of the scenarios, but we haven't identified any additional mitigations or additional transit services at this stage that would kind of complement and work well with the project. So that's what we're really working with the transit working group is what projects make sense to fit with it, and then we can include those in the evaluation once we get there.
Does that help, Mayor?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilor Parker, your question?
Just one more. Back to you, Matt, on your impossible diversion impacts on 99. When we currently have diversion, say there's a traffic jam or something going on, the biggest impact is not necessarily on 99. It is on the access roads from I-5 into 99. I think the mayor commutes from Hillsborough, and I think probably the worst part of that commute is getting off at Aurora and trying to make your way to 99. 99 is actually an easier ride. So when you're taking a look at your diversion numbers, are you only taking a look at 99, or are you taking a look at how people get to 99?
Yeah, it's both. So we're looking at the entire regional network and all the major streets on it, and the traffic and circulation patterns that would happen. I mean, the way it works in the model is it looks at all the different route pairs in the region, an origin and a destination, and it figures out the fastest way to get from point A to point B with all that traffic in the system. And the way the model thinks, it's time is money. So and money is time. So when there's a toll there, it's looking at that as like taking you more time, right? But there's also a travel time savings associated with that time, with the change in that volume, right? So it's comparing all these different scenarios against each other, and it's considering what kind of travel time savings you can get, and it's making a route choice, kind of like a computer does, right? It doesn't have any motion behind it. It's going A to B. What's my fastest route when considering whether there's a toll or not? And that's the method it kind of goes through.
Yeah, no, I just want to back up Councilor Parker. I think Ellen Road and South End Road, I feel like I'm thinking if there's an accident on Highway 99, where does all the traffic go? Right? And it always goes to South End and around 99 that way. But Ellen Road on the other side, on the west side, is our exit. And I'm just, my concern is that, you know, I encourage you, if you haven't driven through Canby, to come through. When I hear your mitigation of like, we make intersections bigger, I don't know how that's possible here. Like, I'm just not sure that I understand how that works, but I trust that you're professionals and you've done this in places where people have said the same thing. But I would just really encourage you to drive through here if you haven't yet, because it's a unique community with a unique transportation system, because we had logging and we had a train route through town and we had all these things. And so it's odd, but if you haven't, as part of this process, I just really want to encourage you to drive through Canby if you haven't yet, because some of the mitigation, I'm just not sure how it's possible. I'm not an expert in your field, so I'm sure there are things I'm not considering, but I think it would be, given the unique nature of where our community sits, how big it is, and that there's only one way in and one way out, I just really encourage you to drive through it as part of your process.
Yes.
This is where we maybe make a pitch for undergrounding the railroad so that then we can widen 99. Is that kind of what I'm hearing, Sarah?
Sounds easy. Let's just ask UP.
Well, all that extra tolling revenue that we'll have, right? Lucinda will be able to do that.
Yeah, okay.
Councilor Varwick?
That's a great segue about the extra tolling revenue. So I imagine, and I can assume, that once the infrastructure has been made, that's going to be in perpetuity, and tolling will not ever go away once it's done, correct?
Looks like Lucinda froze.
I did freeze.
Oh, okay. Did you hear my question, Lucinda?
I did not. I froze right when you started. I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm happy to ask it again. So I'm making the assumption that once the infrastructure is built and in place with the gantries and whatnot, that tolling is going to be in perpetuity, and there's not going to be any kind of sunset clause for it. It won't ever go away. Is that true? A, and B, once all of the debt is paid from the tolls that are collected, what kind of guarantee does Clackamas County have that extra revenue is going to continue to be spent on projects in Clackamas County?
So the Oregon Transportation Commission will decide if they sunset or not something that we decide at the project level for sure. But when you're talking about the extra revenue, I'm going to the Transportation Commission again this month to ask for that dedication of revenue. And it doesn't have a sunset clause on it. It's just the dedication of revenue. When the debt is paid off, it's whatever's left. So that's the ask. And their answer or approval is that that money would stay on the corridor. So there is no sunset on the ask.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments for Lucinda and her team there? Not seeing any, seeing a lot of head shaking. So at the outset of this, before we even went on air, I told Lucinda that we would try to be nicer and gentler than the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee has been, and I think we've done well. So thank you, Council, for making our guests feel warm and welcome in virtual Canby land. Lucinda, any other comments, or Jenny or Matt?
No, just that to go online and do our online open house and take our survey. And of course, we look forward to your comments. And thank you for allowing us some time this evening.
Well, I appreciate the three of you being here this evening and getting us up to speed. I appreciate, I think you filled in a lot of areas that I may have missed in previous updates to the council. So thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Council, for that. I appreciate it. Moving into mayor's business, my comments will, I don't know, we'll see how long I go. I have nothing to report on Clackamas County Coordinating Committee because that meets tomorrow evening. The Area Commission on Transportation is going to be, I think, later this month, or not even till October. Parks and Rec Committee will be meeting later this month as well. Give everyone an update on city manager piece. So on the city manager front, the recruiting firm that we used, of Mr. Phil McKinnon and his partner, have returned a very favorable background check piece that they did on our candidate. So my ask of the council is, I know that we'd had conversation about doing another or an additional in-depth background check piece beyond our recruiting company's background search. Is that something that the council still wants to do? We have done that in previous city manager searches, though, again, not necessarily have to be done. With talking with our city attorney, we believe that we can probably have that done internally with either our staff and or with through our police department doing some of that heavy lifting for us. And then the other piece is, if we decide to do that, I would like simultaneously to open up at least the dialogue and initial negotiations with our candidate to at least get that ball rolling, of course, pending a second further in-depth background search if we so choose. Councilor Spoon?
I would like to see us do the additional in-depth background search. I think it's one of the most important decisions we make as a council is who our city administrator is going to be. And I don't think it's worth not doing that, because I think that the risk is high and the reward is high. So if this additional search comes back clean, I think we can all move forward with confidence. But I will support you in opening negotiations during that process, since the initial review came back clean and promising. I feel good about opening that. I just want to make sure that we do have the additional search. And I'd like that additional search to include, research on references that might not include the list that was given by the candidates. And so I am not a search committee professional, but I know that's something that can be done. And I think, our city deserves the best candidate. And so if we can figure out, however that search is done, if that list can be done, if they can talk to people that were not provided just by the candidate. And then I would love an update. I would love a list of what that search entails. Just an update. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was also discussing with Mr. Lindsay was at our next city council meeting, having we believe we can probably have the additional background search done pretty quickly. And so that our goal would be at the next city council meeting to have an exec session to discuss the findings of both background checks and also bring forth to the council what was hopefully negotiated in terms of terms for us to discuss even further, and then hopefully get approved so that we can move forward with getting the person started and in place.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
Thank you, Sarah, or Councilor Spoon. Councilor President Dale?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I wholeheartedly support you in parallel being authorized by the council to go off and negotiate. You've done it before. You're very good at it. You know our bumpers, and we ought to go ahead and get that rolling. For the sake of sunshining, with the mayor's consent, I spoke with our police chief about the idea of turning over the background check to him personally, to go ahead and lead that, as our current city administrator and the previous investigator will be out of the picture after tonight. He expressed great confidence that he could oversee that, do a very good job and a timely job, because the candidate's local and is very well connected with municipalities that the chief and our detectives are very familiar with. So as Sarah mentioned, getting out to those non-reference references is much more feasible in this case than it would be, say, with a remote candidate. So I would like to suggest that the council also by consensus endorse turning that investigation over to the chief, and looking forward to his timely reports at our exec session.
Okay. Thank you, Council President Dale. I appreciate that.
Wasn't a motion, just an encouragement for consensus.
Oh, no, I got you. No, and that's what I'm looking for, is a consensus piece, not necessarily a motion here. So, Councilor Parker, did I see a hand waiver at the same time?
Yeah, daylight's burning. Let's go ahead and do it. Go ahead and begin negotiations, and let's turn this over to the chief and get this done.
Okay. All right, I'm seeing head nods, and Councilor Hensley, you are on board as well? Councilor Hensley?
Yes.
Okay. You're on. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. The other note I had here was talking about, so earlier this evening, the council had a work session regarding the Walnut Street extension, which is a road we're looking at moving a connection between our industrial park and Highway 99. And in that conversation was brought up a conversation about looking at doing some sort of a bond for that project, along with other road maintenance projects within the city of Canby, possibly including some bringing in some county road aspects and getting those up to date. So I know that that's been a conversation piece that Councilor Parker and I have had a couple of times, and I think it's thank you, Councilor Parker, for the idea behind it. I think it's a good one, and so I think we need to keep that moving forward as a conversation as well. I want to thank the Cuts Forth family for a great car show this past weekend. It was, wow, well attended, 500 cars or more. I was able to get there towards the end, and I always like to see the cars pouring. Usually it's out of downtown, but leaving the fairgrounds in mass exodus was pretty cool. Lots of really great cars and a great turnout for that. So I appreciate the push of the Cutsworth family and working with the event center crew to pull that together and pull it off. So very well done on that front. I think that is all that I have on my list for this evening. We'll go into Councilor Comments Liaison Reports, and we'll go clockwise around my screen. And first up is Council President Dale.
Mine's easy tonight, Mr. Mayor. Cub has not yet met. They meet next week, so catch you double next time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilor Spoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. Canby Area Transit met virtually for the first time, got back in the swing of things, and we discussed how to use our next. So as you know, we've done taken a number of steps towards increasing service. Julie and now Todd have been really vigilant about getting grants and getting new buses and all of that. So discussed what the next phase would be based on the community input that we got a couple of years ago when we had the consultant in discussing with us. It sounds like the advisory committee is committed to the next phase being a local circulator, which I think is really exciting. And I think it's going to really be exciting for our local businesses and our community that has trouble getting from the far reaches into town. However, because of COVID, things like the state transportation funds and gas tax and all of that are a little bit uncertain. So there's no timeline on what that looks like, but it did seem to have the full consensus of the committee to be the next step. So as we work through the next several months and figuring out what revenue looks like, I'm hoping that we'll see that before too long. But it's definitely the next increase in service we're going to see. It's just a matter of what revenue looks like as we navigate the long-term effects of the shutdown and COVID. Additionally, I wanted to discuss, we talked about probably about a year ago when we initially did the feasibility study for the Ackerman project. We discussed doing a similar study for Wayside, like almost a feasibility study to see what could be done on that particular land and what couldn't be done. It was something that was really important to me when we put that money aside for Ackerman. And it seemed like on the dais, we kind of had consensus that if we're willing to do that for Ackerman, we'd be willing to do a similar study for Wayside, just almost a turf feasibility study to see what can actually be done on that land. Because there's some question about what portions of it are maybe floodplain, which portions have other limitations because of water issues. So I just wanted to bring that back up again and see if we could at least get that piece moving forward and maybe use some of the SDC funds to get a feasibility study there so that the Parks Committee can have that information moving forward as we move into the next phase of developing parks. So that's a question. But in addition to that, we met several weeks ago, Mayor, to discuss a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and we haven't had an opportunity to revisit it. So I was just kind of hoping that I could get an update on where you're at with those two pieces to see if we can give some movement and progress forward for our community.
Sorry, I'm jotting as we speak here. Regarding the Wayside feasibility study piece, I know that has come up in conversation at the Parks piece. And the last meeting was canceled because they all attended the interviews for the city manager search that we were in. And the meeting prior to that was a lot of conversation about, we had Julie Blums and Sandy Frohn, who was the planning director at the time. So a lot of the conversation was about pushing and moving forward with a overall parks master plan piece. That is a topic. So the Wayside feasibility piece, I know that it is a conversation item or wasn't in the past, and I can definitely bring that back to the Parks Advisory Board and have that conversation with them in light of where we're at right now with what we need to do tonight regarding an interim city manager piece and a new city manager coming on. It's definitely something that I think we should take a look at and try to get that piece going.
Is it, can we even really do a master plan if we don't know what can and can't be done with the land? Like, isn't a feasibility study maybe the first step in that process before we get to the master plan?
That I can't answer, or I'm not sure. I think they may coincide in terms of what can be done. Again, the history on that piece of property has gone through a couple of different tales of what could be done or what can't be done. I know in some preliminary conversations that there were what's called dry deck tiles put in underneath the ground that help with drainage. That necessarily doesn't mean it needs to be a wetlands area, but that's not over all of that area. So one may need to come before the other. That piece I don't know. That would be a question I'll have to ask planning.
Okay, I would just then say my piece that when we discussed Ackerman, it was part of the conversation that if we're going to spend that money on the Ackerman feasibility, that we would do the same thing for Wayside, and there hasn't been a lot of movement there. So regardless of what else happens, I thought that was something that we kind of agreed upon as part of the process. It was something that we discussed relatively at length on the dais. So I'd like to see that happen for sure.
Okay. And then regarding the other piece from our conversation, Councilor Spoon, I apologize, but I've not had a lot of extra time to dive further into it based on our conversation. I've been doing some work with Clackamas County. So at C4, we're having, as part of our dialogue, a conversation around the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece at the county level. So I know that I'm involved in those conversations here coming up. I think in this meeting and I think the next one as well. And so I will have some more input regarding that and how that might look as the county's putting together that piece for them, as well as what that might look like here in Canby. So, we're working at a couple of different levels on what that might look like. Anything else, Councilor Spoon? Okay. Councilor Hensley?
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Parker?
Well, hi there. You've already covered the cruise-in. I was going to give a report from the County Fair Board on the first weekend of our new drive-in. Friday was great with 65 cars. Saturday, we had 42. Sunday, we were down to 18. We're learning a lot. I was talking to Councilor Spoon about when she sponsored movies in the park. It's more complicated than we imagine. For example, with Disney, when you buy their movie, such as the Canby Cinema, then you have to play it at least 2 weeks. So there was some criticism about the selection of movies. What we've done is decided to flip the order of that. And so this week, the first movie will be The Avengers. So that will be playing first. Getting Dark Earlier, we'll have an 8 p.m. starting time, Friday through Sunday. And we've been pleasantly surprised at how respectful guests have been to our rules and not leaving trash. So thank you. Big news. This is a huge opportunity. We are going to have a scare fair, a drive-through scare fair. We are taking the opportunity that a number of the big haunted houses in Oregon are not happening. And so there's a consortium of people with a bunch of Halloween equipment and nowhere to go. So we're going to have a drive-through scare fair at the Clackamas County Fairgrounds each of the weekends in October. So I'll have some more information on that. If you drive by the fairgrounds, you'll see that the haunted house folks have already started unloading this, and they're very excited to have a venue where they can do something this year. Because for those of us who have gone to haunted houses in the past, you know, they're kind of crowded and you're moving in these corridors and that sort of thing. Not the sort of thing we can do this year. On the bicycle committee news, again, this is important because there's going to be some difficult conversations with neighbors adjacent to the Traverso property. And I've been trying to mediate some of those on behalf of the bike committee, but the bike committee has secured a $35,000 grant to begin initial assessment and review of how the Traverso addition can be turned into an extension of the bike trail. I've talked to Under Sheriff Angie Brandenburg, now Sheriff-elect Brandenburg, and she says, if there is no reason, she says, that the city of Canby should not pursue development of a public amenity, such as a trail, because of concerns over safety or potential criminal activity. She says it will be her department's responsibility to respond and deal with public safety issues in the unincorporated area. So we have that assurance from the sheriff-elect, and also in discussions with the bike committee, the consultant will be spending maybe up to 1/4 of his time talking with neighbors about concerns and mitigations. So that is a part of the report that will eventually come back to us. And finally, if you have a chance, drop by Bikes and More on First Avenue and take a peek in the window and see what a bike shop looks like during a virus. Tony had sold out every one of his bikes, and now he's finally starting to get a few of them in. But there's been a worldwide shortage of bicycling because, like golf and a few other things, it's one of those things you can do in a pandemic. So bicycling is big these days. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Parker. I appreciate that. Who knew, right? I mean, one of those things with, you know, Council President Dale and I have conversation often of like, shoulda, woulda, and coulda. Had I would have known bikes would have been popular, I would have maybe looked at Schwinn and Huffy and who makes those. And the other piece would have been plexiglass companies. With the amount of plexiglass that I see going in all over the place. And then eyewear that, you know, in my day job, I get to mask up and wear either a face shield or protective eye goggles, again, being plastic or acrylic or whatever fancy word you want to use. But yeah, that's exciting. And I think a lot of it too goes to Joni and the type of business he runs. He runs a great business, and he is, I think he is definitely Canby through and through. So he has done a great job, and I'm glad to hear that there's success. Hopefully he'll get more inventory in so that he can keep selling new bikes. So that's great. Councilor Varwig.
Thank you. I actually did stop by Canby Bikes last week trying to buy a bike for my daughter, and he said, I don't have any bikes for sale. I have a few that might be coming in, but they're pre-sold because people are just buying them sight unseen, which that's great. I'm impressed. Councilor Swin, did you have something to say?
I just bought my son a bike there yesterday. He has more the size down coming in next week. He has 3 more. So go get.
Perfect. I'm just going to go buy one, and it doesn't matter what it looks like because she's ready for a new bike. We got rid of her old one thinking that we'd just buy her a new one, and that was a mistake. I was also, side note, was impressed with how many repairs he was doing. And so you have to find something to do when you don't have bikes to sell. He had a lot of repairs going on, so that was great. Very kind and very nice in there. So way to go, Tony and team. I don't have a lot. I just want to announce that The library director will be starting on the 21st of September, which is great. It is Danny Smith is his name, and he was previously the deputy director of the Salem Public Library and had spent some time there also as the interim director. So we're excited to have Danny on board and looking forward to meeting him and seeing what he can do to fill the shoes of the great Irene Green, who has retired. On the fire department side, they are seeking a renewal of their levy and they are looking for endorsements. So you might check your email when this meeting is over. They have probably emailed you asking, if you haven't already, if you would like to endorse the renewal of the levy. And just to notate, it's not an additional cost. They are just seeking a renewal of the current levy. So amounts won't change. They're just looking for a renewal. So if you want to endorse that, check your email, and community, if you want to endorse that as well. I'm sure they would love to have that, especially from some of our local businesses. So that's all that I have for tonight.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Moving in, we'll do the consent agenda. If I can get a motion on that, please.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to point out, Sean, the supervisor at Canby Fire that's in charge of collecting the endorsements, he thanked me. I asked him where he was. This is so important to them. He was fighting the White River Fire at the time and took a moment to say thanks. So that's how good Canby Fire is. They're pretty amazing folks. Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the minutes of the August 19th, 2020 City Council work session and regular meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Sorry, sir. Councilor Spoon beat you to it.
It's all good.
Motion's been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the August 19th, 2020 City Council work session and regular meeting. Any conversation or discussion on that? No? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Councilor Hensley? That carries 5-0. All right, next up, moving into a series of resolutions and ordinances. First resolution is number 1341, a resolution adopting Canby's 2020 preservation plan. Mr. Joe, are you there, sir, to give us a rundown, or do we have a presenter?
You have a presenter. This is Jamie Stickle, Economic Development Director. Good evening, everybody.
Well, hello, Jamie. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. Tonight, it's my pleasure to present the resolution for the adoption of the Canby Preservation Plan for your consideration. Typically, when we are discussing Canby's heritage and historic preservation in general, we are looking to the past. So this project is unique because it takes Canby's history and allows us to better plan for the future. The State Historic Preservation Office suggested that Canby Heritage and Landmark Commission consider creating a preservation plan to complement the work that has been completed since the revival of the Heritage and Landmark Commission in 2013. Additionally, the plan will provide direction for future projects and initiatives. The preservation plan was created by historic preservation consultants Northwest Vernacular. I think some of you met them when they were here, on behalf of the city's Heritage and Landmark Commission. And as you will remember, the plan was presented by the consultants at the June 3rd City Council work session. The plan reviewed Canby's historical assets and presented a roadmap for the future preservation and heritage efforts. The consultants distributed a survey, conducted meetings with strategic stakeholders, completed in-person tours of Canby, and reviewed the work that had been completed previously. Northwest Vernacular provided a historical context, overview of current historic preservation efforts, goals and priorities, as well as recommendations and an implementation plan. The consultants provided a review of Canby's historic attributes, including buildings, trees, and parks. The recommendations and implementation focuses on public education, continued outreach, and code amendments to support the work. Furthermore, the preservation plan can be added to the city's comprehensive plan, which the planning department anticipates to update in the near future. The plan was funded in part with a 2019-2020 certified local government grant, which is administered by the State Historic Preservation Office and matched by the city. And additionally, the Kinsman Foundation provided a $5,000 grant. Not ones to let grass grow under their feet, there are numerous efforts underway already by the Heritage and Landmark Commission. These efforts include gathering materials for preservation webpage, overseeing the effort to develop a reconnaissance level survey and contact statement for the Clackamas County Fairgrounds and Event Center, as well as utilizing the upcoming October Heritage and Landmark Commission meeting to finalize the full list of projects for 21-22. This concludes my presentation. In your packet, you will find Resolution 1341, which would formally adopt the 2020 Canby Historic Preservation Plan. It is staff's recommendation that council adopts the plan this evening. With that, I will open it for dialogue or any questions you may have of me. Thank you for your time in considering this resolution.
Thank you, Jamie. I must say I was expecting a longer presentation. And that's okay. We're already at 8:30, which is not a big deal with this. We have these nights. I will say this is a tremendous plan. I was thoroughly impressed with what's been put together here. I really appreciate the action plan items that are in there, and I like how it ties to our comp plan, and I think it provides a great element for when we revisit and start going back through to redo our comp plan to be able to put these elements into that. So kudos to the people that were brought in to do this. Yeah, this is a great plan, and I really appreciate the hard work put into this. This is going to be a really big piece, and we always talk about Canby's history and where we're at and where we're going, and we have to keep a toe back in the past. Otherwise, we, as we know, we'll repeat things that we don't want to, and we lose a lot of our history as we grow and we change. So I think this will do a lot to help us preserve that. So thank you to you and the consultants and everyone else that worked on this. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, are you ready for a motion?
I am, sir.
I move to approve Resolution 1341 to formally adopt the Canby Historic Preservation Plan.
I have a quick question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Quick question for Joe. By adopting the plan, it has a lot of deliverables, concrete recommendations, which I love. I just adore that about the plan. But I assume that anything like changes to ordinances, things that require separate hearings, restructuring of the powers of the Heritage Board and such, those will be done as separate items, right?
Yes, separate items, and they're still discretionary. You guys have ultimate legislative authority here in town.
Great. We're just basically accepting and thanking and blessing the plan, right?
Correct.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. So any other questions before I accept the motion? No, not seeing any. Motion's been made by Councilor Parker and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve Resolution 1341, a resolution adopting Canby's 2020 preservation plan. All those in favor? Great. I see 5 hands. Anyone opposed? Not seeing. That passes 5-0. Looks like the remaining, the next couple are all second reading options. Next up is Ordinance 1535, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby. 10,878 square feet of real property. I will hold off on the rest of that because I'm gonna have to read it all later. But basically, as we had the presentation last meeting, this is a very long strip of land, part of the development over, totally gonna butcher this, off of Redwood, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, off of Redwood. Thank you, Sean. And so it's adding into that piece for developer and will eventually be part of the greater development. Joe, am I leaving anything off of that recap?
No, the only additional item isn't specifically about this, but it is a follow-up to it, which is under unfinished business at the end. We will ask you then to move to approve the findings, conclusions, and final order for this action. If you're taking it now, you have to have those findings, conclusions, and final order in place. So that's going to be a follow-up item, but it's worth mentioning right now, so you're thinking in advance about what you're going to do at the end.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll take a motion, please. Great. Thank you, Councilor Varwig, for making a motion. I appreciate it.
There we go. I'm unmuted and it went away from me here. Hold on one second. Where did it go? I did have it. Bear with me. There it is. Okay. I move to approve ordinance number 1535, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon, 10,878 square feet of real property, described as a portion of tax lot 100 of Northwest 1/4, section 34, township 3S, R1E, WM, tax map 31E, 34B, and approximately 300 square feet of adjacent North Redwood Street right-of-way, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5 acre RRFF-5 to city medium density residential R-1.5 for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the Canby city limits.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
No worries.
I'm going to take the easy load of seconding. Thank you, Council President Dale. Motion's been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Council President Dale to approve ordinance number 1535, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon, 10,878 square feet of real property described as a portion of tax lot 100 of the Northwest 1/4, section 34, township 3S, R1E, WM, tax map 31E, 34B, and approximately 350 square feet of adjacent North Redwood Street right-of-way, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5 acre, RRFF-5, to city medium density residential, R1.5, to the entire area, setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the Canby city limits. Any further discussion or comment? Not seeing any. Roll call vote.
Council President Dale,
Aye.
Councilor Hensley,
Aye.
Councilor Parker,
Aye.
Councilor Spoon,
Aye.
Councilor Varwig.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Ordinance number 1533, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to execute a contract with DNI Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $856,364 for construction of the South Ivy Street sanitary sewer replacement. Again, talked about at the last meeting, so we're doing a big, huge sewer replacement, lift station, build out on South Ivy to prepare for development out there for a couple of new housing developments. So pretty well planned out over the last couple of years in terms of funding. Any questions of staff? Joe, did I leave anything out?
No, I did want to say that I did look into it to try to answer a few of the questions and concerns that Councilor Parker raised about when we open up a street project and then it seems like we finish it and then months later somebody else comes along and reopens it and it looks kind of weird. And in talking with Jerry and then in looking actually at the county has now released a virtual workshop, and I can say more maybe about that. during the reports later on. But this project is slated to be November of this year. And then sadly, the county bumped out their project for the sidewalks and the lighting to between March of 2022 and September of 2022. And so this sewer is 60 years old, and we're hoping to replace it, and we're going to do a decent patch up so that the road works well, but it's become increasingly hard to work together, I guess, on a perfect timeline. Although I will say there is some now some real possibility in trying to go underground with the utility company due to friendly folks that are now on the board over there at Canby Utility. And so we are going to be trying to communicate and work between now and when the county portion of this goes on South Ivy, so that we can at least try to make this a more perfect project, even if we can't perfect the timing of it.
Thank you for circling back and addressing those pieces. Obviously not ideal in terms of having to tear up stretches of road more than once. Too bad that those agencies can't coordinate this better.
Mr. Mayor, did I hear Joe assure us though that in the end we get the nice half street improvement?
He did say that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just making sure when you and I can remind him of that.
It'll be positive,
Yeah,
and then we'll control our own destiny when it comes to that road.
right.
Our own destiny. Fantastic. Okay. Any other questions for staff on this one? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 1533, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to execute a contract with D&I Excavating Inc. in the amount of $856,364 for construction of the South Ivy Street sanitary sewer replacement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council President Dale, for the second. Motion's been made by Councilor Barwig and seconded by Council President Dale to approve ordinance number 1533. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to execute a contract with D&I Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $856,364 for construction of the South Ivy Street sanitary sewer replacement. Any discussion? No? Roll call vote?
Council President Dale,
Aye.
Councilor Hensley,
Councilor Hensley?
Oh yeah, I didn't hear my name. Aye.
Councilor Parker,
Yes.
Councilor Spoon,
Aye.
Councilor Varwig.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Let's see, ordinance number 1534, an ordinance authorizing the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Landscape Structures Incorporated to purchase playground equipment for Locust Street Park. Again, this is an item that we talked about last meeting. So we're making some investment in replacing, which will appear to be all the playground equipment and playground structures at Locust Street Park. Coming up here, bids have been put out. Joe, my understanding is you've got answers to questions that were asked at the last meeting.
Yes, I did a little follow-up on this as well. And there was $20,000 of quote unquote savings, right? When this was slated to be a $150,000 project, it was $130,000. And there was discussion and questions about whether or not we could do further ADA add-ons that might, for the playground equipment. And when I spoke with Jeff from our Parks Department, he said actually that 20,000 savings was already earmarked to go to what I would describe, I guess, is kind of a sloped skirt of cement that goes around the whole thing, and then the bark chips in the middle. But he said that part of the reason for that sloped cement skirt was so that there would be greater access for things with wheels, and that then as an additional add-on, even though they were trying to fill up the whole area, they were looking to see if they could attach some sort of ramp to make things a little bit more accessible. But the whole thing itself is ADA compliant. And so you started or inspired at least looking into perhaps an additional ramp that they might be able to do. But the money itself that we saved is being spent on the cement and the bark chips.
Okay. Councilor Spoon?
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate that. But still, it sounds like there's still not, like, for example, the city of Canby still doesn't have a swing that a child in a wheelchair can utilize, right? Like, they're not planning on adding anything like that.
If you want, I can further poke around / inspire people to look a little bit harder and try to figure out if that's something that they can do with this, with minimal addition, and see if we can make that work too.
Joe, I'd like that, please. If we can, yeah, I'd like to try to kick in a few doors on that one as well. I mean, we really don't have anything that equivalent here in Canby. I think it's important, and we've spent a lot of time over the years addressing ADA pieces, with ramps at crosswalks. I'll go back to previous city councilor Rich Ayers' comment about we went through and we redid a stretch of road and sidewalks, but yet the giant phone pole sat right in the middle of the sidewalk, which makes it impossible for a mom in a stroller, let alone someone in a motorized wheelchair or a manual wheelchair, get around it. I'd like to think that we can take a look at it and try to do better on this one, Joe, if we can.
Noted, and I will pursue it.
I appreciate that, Mayor. Yeah, I think, and we kind of discussed last time that if we're making playground equipment accessible to a wheelchair that wasn't previously, we might even be able to tap into SDCs if we need to, because we're not replacing, we're expanding capacity. But whatever it takes to make our equipment more accessible to people in the community is something I'm a fan of.
Councilor Varwig?
Yeah, I second all of that. And I think that I would also like to add that I think moving forward, any of our parks that are updated, that should be a minimum standard, is that every park in our community should have something for everyone, and have ADA accessible swings and play areas. So I think if we can put that in the notes that moving forward, the minimum standard is that there should be ADA accessible, not just ramps and bark, but also ADA accessible toys.
Okay.
And that is something too that I'll pass along to probably, I'll say the planning commission, but ultimately it'll probably be the planning department that we'll have to look at. If that's something that we want to memorialize going forward, we'll probably have to make some adjustments to planning and design standard pieces. So I will push that along in that regards. So yes, Councilor Varwig.
I should say too that ADA doesn't necessarily only mean wheelchair accessible either. So there's
Correct.
Definitely some other things that we should be looking into as far as ADA.
Absolutely.
Great addition. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Any other discussion on this particular topic before I ask for a motion? No? All right. I'll take a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize ordinance number 1534, an ordinance authorizing interim city administrator to execute a contract with Landscape Structures Incorporated to purchase playground equipment for Locust Street Park.
Great, thank you, sir. I have a second or not? Thank you, Councilor Spoon. Motion's been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve ordinance number 1534, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with Landscape Structures Incorporated in the amount of $130,361.47. Any further discussion? No. Roll call vote, please.
Council President Dale,
Aye.
Councilor Hensley,
Aye.
Councilor Parker, Councilor Spoon,
Aye.
Councilor Varwig.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Next up is ordinance number 1536, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to purchase 4 vehicles for Canby area transit from Creative Bus Sales of Canby, Oregon. And this is also a second reading. So again, last meeting, so this ordinance and the next one was presented to us regarding expansion of, I think, adding and replacing a couple of buses to Canby area transit to help with our bus service for the city and surrounding area. And it was pretty cut and dry. I think we were getting roughly, I don't know, $1 million worth of buses for like $300,000, what I understand. So, Joe, any other add-ons to that recap?
No, it was presented by our new director, Todd Wood, just so you remember his name, because he does a good job for us.
He is doing a very good job. All right. I will take a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, well,
Oh,
let me
yes.
I move to adopt ordinance 1536, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to purchase 4 vehicles for Canby area transit from Creative Bus Sales of Canby, Oregon.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President Dale. Motion's been made by Councilor Spoon and seconded by Council President Dale to approve ordinance number 1536, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to purchase 4 vehicles for Canby area transit from Creative Bus Sales of Canby, Oregon. Second reading, so roll call vote.
Councilor Dale,
Aye.
Councilor Hensley, Councilor Hensley,
Aye.
Councilor Parker,
Aye.
Councilor
Aye.
Councilor Varwig,
Aye.
Oh,
Councilor Spoon.
aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Ordinance number 1537, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to purchase 1 vehicle for Canby area transit from Gillig LLC of California. Again, piggybacking on the previous ordinance, just another added bus replacement part we're looking at. We'll take a motion on that one. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt, sorry, hold on, let me find it again. Ordinance 1537, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to purchase 1 vehicle for Canby area transit from Gillig LLC of California.
Great, thank you. Mr. Varwig, thank you. Motion's been made by Councilor Spoon and seconded by Councilor Varwig to approve ordinance number 1537, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and interim city administrator to purchase 1 vehicle for Canby area transit from Gillig LLC of California. Any further discussion? Great, roll call vote.
Council President Dale,
Aye.
Councilor Hensley,
Aye.
Councilor Parker, Councilor Parker,
You're muted.
Aye.
Councilor Spoon,
Aye.
Councilor Varwig.
Aye.
Thank you all. That passes 5-0. Last ordinance of the evening is ordinance number 1538, an ordinance authorizing the interim city administrator to enter an employment contract between the city of Canby and Brett J. Smith and declaring an emergency. Joe, if you'll take this one, please. And
Absolutely. Okay, so this is an ordinance, and now you'll maybe recognize that there's a telephone joining you tonight. That is actually Brett J. Smith. He's here if you have any additional questions for him. And he's very interested in what we're about to talk about because he's the recipient of this kind of contractual agreement that we've worked out with him. He has served the city of Canby for coming up on 11 years, I guess. And what he would like to do is PERS this last year actually expanded on one's ability to retire, but then do a bit of a work back. And some of the reasons in which the city will benefit from the idea of our current chief being able to retire, but then sit here and work for us to a date certain, is that we like our chief. He's done a great job for us. He actually hasn't, in the time he's worked here, really, he not only is he in good standing, but he has not received, he's received cost of living adjustments, but he has never actually received a raise. And what he would like to do, what he's proposing to do, is be able to retire at the end of the month here with PERS officially, and then get that retirement money stream going. And right now, that can be anywhere from 30 to 45 to 60 days before you actually receive your first check. We would like to benefit from him continuing to work for us at everything being the same, so that we have some continuity with him while we're still, we have some vacancies in the police department that we just recently filled up. There is still one vacancy, and we would have another vacancy if he were to leave. And of the 3 vacancies that we recently hired for, one of them is just now coming out of, because we had an extended time down at the academy because of COVID. Things shut down. We were actually able to squeak one out first because he was so close to being done with his academy. So they got those guys out, and then one of our last ones is coming out now. And so they all need to go through field training. And so we think that the people who are here and have done a great job, we would like to maintain them, but it's also convenient for a city to have a date certain. So if he puts in this agreement, and we've agreed to it, an end date, we usually can't in employment law, demand people have the right to work. They have a property right and a liberty interest in working, and you can't force their retirement. But if you do something like this, you can actually agree on an end date. And so in doing that, that allows for us to properly come up with a succession plan. It actually allows us to get the next city administrator in place, and they can see the lay of the land before they try to replace a big position like a chief of police. So what this actually does too is it allows us, it gives us the benefit of not paying the employee contribution of PERS, and part of this agreement takes that money and it actually pays it into a deferred comp. So it isn't anything more for the city to pay, but it actually gives the chief that little raise that we've never given him. And so he'll have a slight boost in his deferred comp. It won't cost the city any more than if he had just decided to stay here until April 1st. But it gives us a pure succession plan that we can rely on and that he can rely on, and that he'll then not have to worry about the timeliness of how PERS is going to pay him or not. And it gets us through a time where we have some vacancies. And so with all of that, I would wholeheartedly be behind you guys adopting this ordinance. This particular ordinance we wanted to get in place to you today so that there could be a second reading, because as you know, we need a second reading. And then there's an emergency clause in there because of the safety and welfare idea behind emergencies. Is policing is an essential and important part of any city's services, and it's particularly nowadays, it's actually particularly more important that we are up to speed on our first responders. And so I would claim that it fits that legal definition of emergency for the purposes of getting this to be law right after the second reading, so that he knows that this agreement is in place, so he can go to the retirement board and know that where he's employed and continues to be employed, even though he's signing off on his job, he's actually going to keep his job under this agreement until April 1st of next year.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Certainly.
Chief, since you're on the line, did you want to make any comment?
Yeah, I'll just make a short one just because it might be appropriate. I just want to, most of you probably already know that I was originally going to retire and leave July 1st, but with COVID and some of the racial unrest we have in our country, our vacancies, I've extended that out. And during that process here, we're looking at our vacancies and some of the landscape here. I tried to think about a little bit about what our future looks like. And I know hiring and retention is going to be, it's a difficult process for us now. I think it's going to be more difficult. So in attempting to be a little bit creative, attempting to be a good steward of what we have, I'm hoping that if this is approved, it would be, you know, such a work back will promote employee retention somewhere down the road. It's an opportunity at this time that retention could be applied for qualified officers who might be in a position like myself that could remain within the city and be a benefit to the city. It would not only be a incentive for the officer, but again, for the city at no additional cost. And remaining as a full-time employee with the city of Canby while ending their PERS participation, I think can be a win for everyone. So in part, it's looking at the future and looking at what might be an incentive to keep people here employed in place work that is challenging while not costing the city any additional monies because of the opportunity we have in this window, at least with this extension until 2024 with the changes in officers to work. So in part, I think I wanted to include that as part of a vision piece here for our city in looking at officer retention.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions of the chief or of our city attorney?
I did want to say one more thing personally, because I wanted to make a record of it, is in talking with the chief, I wanted to be completely transparent about, you know, sometimes you contract and it's an adversarial setting. This is actually where we're exactly on the same page and where it's a win-win for everybody. And this really is him just continuing on for the purposes of how he works with Canby, how he accrues vacation, how he receives still his health benefits. And it really is just for him the ability to give us that date and to jump out of the PERS system. And I just wanted to be explicit about that because sometimes when you contract with people, the idea is I don't want you to come back and look at the four corners of the document and argue away some sort of benefit. The real purpose here was to keep him whole exactly where he's at and allow him to just jump out of PERS so that he can take advantage of that for this short amount of time, and we get to take advantage of somebody who's done a great job for us.
Thank you, Joe.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move to authorize Ordinance 1538, an ordinance authorizing the interim city administrator to enter into an employment contract between the city of Canby and Brett J. Smith and declaring an emergency.
And I will second.
Motion's been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Varwig to approve ordinance number 1538, an ordinance authorizing the interim city administrator to enter into an employment contract between the city of Canby and Brett J. Smith and declaring an emergency. Any other discussion on the matter? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
That passes 5-0. Great. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody.
Moving into unfinished business, we need to approve the findings, conclusions, and order for the Redwood Landing 2 annexation, city file annex or ANN/ZC 20-01, a linear strip of land approximately 10,878 square feet in size. Joe,
Yes,
you know any background on this? Or is this pretty much just wrapping up what we did earlier?
this is actually, yeah, the you guys having a final order attached to what we did earlier.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
Mr.
Verwin, your
Mayor,
decision?
yes, I'm going to make a motion that we accept the findings, conclusions, and order Redwood Landing 2 annexation, city file ANNZC 20-01, a linear strip of land approximately 10,878 square feet in size.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Motion's been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve the findings, conclusions, and order for Redwood Landing 2 annexation, city file ANN/ZC 20-01, a linear strip of land approximately 10,878 square feet in size. Any further discussion on the matter? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries 5-0. Next on the agenda this evening is under new business is the appointment of an interim city administrator. So as Joe mentioned earlier, our previous interim/assistant city manager and HR director, Amanda Zeiber, resigned, and it was effective today. And Joe, I appreciate you being able to deliver plaque on our behalf to her today. Really do appreciate the 13 years of service that Amanda provided to us as a city council and to us as a city. 3 times stepping in as the interim city manager, taking us through two very rigorous budget sessions, and having to make some pretty tough decisions in both of those situations. I wish she was here. We could say thank you. Hopefully she knows that we appreciate all that she has done. And I know, Joe, you conveyed those sentiments this afternoon to her and to some of the city staff that was there. So that leaves us at a point where we have a need for an additional interim city manager. So there was lots of conversation over the last couple of months after Amanda's resignation came in, of what options we had. So there was conversation of, do we bring in somebody as an interim through League of Oregon Cities or as a hired gun of some capacity? Suggestion was maybe a former CEO from the private sector. We looked at a couple of different options. Obviously, we needed to get through the process of where we were with the city manager search that we were in, and we've come to a conclusion. I think we've got the right candidate. In fact, I know that we do. I'm very excited about who that is and getting them on. Knowing that we have that decision made, our window of a gap here is probably 6 weeks to maybe 8 weeks. And so with conversation with the council, thought that we could probably fill that internally with one of our own city staff members to be able to have signing ability and do all the things that we need from a city administrator in the truly interim. And so I've had some at the request of the council, had some conversation with our city attorney, Mr. Lindsay, and have broached the subject with him. And he is very eager and excited to be filling that position for the time being. So I ask the council that you appoint our city attorney as our interim city administrator. The piece of compensation, generally in the past, we've always done a 10% adjustment to our interim role. So we've done that previously with the last interim city manager. And so I would ask that we appoint Joe and provide him with that 10% bump as we've done in the past moving forward.
Is a motion appropriate here, Mr. Mayor?
That would be yes.
Yes, thank you. I have full confidence in Mr. Lindsay, so I am happy to move that we appoint our city attorney, Joe Lindsay, to be our interim city administrator, including a 10% pay bump for his interim service period.
I will second.
Okay.
The motion's been moved by Counselor Spoon and seconded by Counselor Varwig to appoint Joe Lindsay as our interim city administrator and provide a 10% compensation for doing the role in the interim during the interim time. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to express my great confidence in Joe. This has been a subject of discussion with you and I at length. And I just want to express my confidence to the council and to the city of Canby that Joe will do a most excellent job. And my thanks to him for being willing to step up on top of all the other duties that he has.
Thank you for that. Joe, did you have a comment?
Oh, no, just thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate your guys' confidences. And what's kind of cool is our charter actually envisions this as a possibility of merging these at times, and sometimes it's necessary. So, you know, I think the founding people of the charter, at least, envisioned that this might be a possibility someday, and I'm happy to step in and happy to work for you guys.
Well, and Joe, appreciate that. Appreciate you stepping up and filling this gap in the interim. And I have asked Joe over the course of the next between now and the next meeting to put together his plan. Obviously, being the city attorney, the doing the prosecutory piece for court, and now taking on the city manager role is a lot. And so I have asked him to, and again, this is a conversation that has been occurring leading up to this, but that we finalize what he may need to do to relieve himself of the city court duties that he has been doing. I think that'll be a huge help, and also figuring out if there's additional HR support that he may need in the absence of having an HR director. I know we do have an HR specialist that we've hired and is doing a great job. And so though having that backup will be important for them, for the two of them as well. And of course, our city recorder, Ms. Passat, is fantastic and does a great job, and I know that she'll keep Joe in order. So I'm counting on all that to happen. So Joe will bring those pieces back for an update at our next city council meeting.
Could I do a quick update right now?
No, you're going to get that next on item 11 there, Mr. I haven't gotten a vote yet, so let's get you the vote first, and then you can do the official city administrator business. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. It passes 5-0. Joe, you're now the interim city administrator, so thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now we'll move into item 11, which is city administrator business and staff reports.
Okay, and what I'll do is I'll first report back when our city recorder, Melissa Bissett, I want to make sure and pronounce that correctly, so I looked over at her. When she showed up, one of her bright, shiny moments on her resume, beyond having a master's in public administration, is that she came to us having worked in McMinnville and doing at least half of her duties down there were HR duties for a while.
Oh, great.
And so what has also come to pass in the time that we've been here since COVID times is that our new HR support staff person has actually gone to Melissa several times for guidance when no one else was around. It seemed to be a perfect union of her past resume and the fact that she actually has a HR designation that if she doesn't get HR experience in the next year will go away, and it costs a couple $1,000s. So what I would suggest as my first answer to your question, Mayor, is that we put her as the guiding kind of HR managerial person so that we can properly train our specialist in the short run. And that will then buy us enough time that when we have our city administrator, he can make a bigger decision about what we need as far as a whole organization. And so with your guys' consensus blessing, I would move to allow her to use those skills and help out Canby.
Well, Joe, I would call a point of order on that. You are now the city administrator, and the city charter prohibits us from getting involved in personnel. That is your decision and your decision alone.
All right. So I would encourage myself to do that, and so I will. I think that should be good. I think the relationships we have in our office are actually pretty good, and I think this will make them stronger. And so I'm looking forward to those two communicating and seeing where the training needs to be done and where some of the hot spots need to be put out in the short run.
Perfect.
Okay.
Very good.
My next report has to do with the quiet zone. And so this takes on a much more ominous discussion. I spoke with Maureen at PBS. They are the engineering firm that has been working on this project today, and I was trying to figure out a couple of things. She brought to us the notion that the price on this has gone up a little bit, but there's been some positive movement. And what I mean by that is the railroad actually has offered its kind of 30-day take it or leave it choice in the matter on whether or not they're going to start to order the flashing, extra flashing lights and the extra equipment that they need at each intersection. In the original plan, we had thought that each intersection was going to be about 89,000 for a total of 267,000. Those have now gone up to about 122,000 each for each crossing. And so the railroad wants from us an assurance if they're going to move forward or not within the next few weeks. And that's why I bring it to you tonight, whether or not a $362,000 spend on their part that we would have to reimburse them for would be something that you would still be willing to stomach. If they get that green light, what they'll do is they'll order the stuff, and once it comes, it should be about a 6-month period to where they order it and then install it. And so your first question that I'm asking is that I'm not going to ask for an answer yet because I want to give you the whole lay of the land that I figured out today. So this quiet zone with that additional, it's 95,000 extra dollars that we would owe the railroad. Oregon ODOT or ODOT Railroad also came back with some of their requirements, but what it does is it solidifies what we have to do at each railroad crossing in order for them to sign off on their portion of it. And those are all acceptable as far as the what we've kind of agreed on and thought we were going to have to do and maintain in order to go forward with this. The additional piece from the actual railroad that was new it also is that there's going to be a maintenance piece on each intersection that now apparently the railroads have changed their minds about once you have these in place, and they're good and it costs so much to review them. And then once they're in place, it was before they wouldn't charge an ongoing maintenance fee. Now they're charging somewhere around 19,000 per intersection. The quote that they gave us was for our 3 intersections, it would be $48,000 annually. So that's another kind of ongoing cost. I wanted to know where we would get that money. So I went and talked to Julie, our finance director, And we started talking about what the highway fund pays and what the county vehicle registration tax can kind of contribute. And right now, we usually, I guess the highway fund in the past, the gas and cigarette, taxes that we have to use for road maintenance, we usually spend it on curbs and sidewalks. That's usually about a $400,000 a year proposition that comes in that we end up spending. She thinks it's down maybe as much as 100,000 this year because of less gasoline being burned in cars because people weren't driving as much for this COVID time. I doubt it's that much, frankly, because I doubt we've completely zeroed out driving and the gas stations during the time of COVID. So I think that's a conservative estimate that we might have lost 100,000 there. But as far as ongoing prices go, we can get the money from there. What we have currently budgeted from the URA for the whole project this year was $1,225,000, and there was an additional $216,900, so basically $217,000 budgeted for the arch. When we went back and tried to plug in the new number from the railroad, and we wanted to give you the most conservative estimate. And so originally, the engineers brought us what they thought was a $575,000 project for the quiet zone for the intersections to make those safe. Canby X came on, and right away that inflated to $892,000. They reduced that somewhat, but what we got in that reduction was a bunch of strings attached, like closing down Elm entirely, and things that we're not sure we're going to be able to do. What we've ended up, and then of course the arch came in at about $435,000 is part of that bid, when originally we had slated the $217,000 for it. So everything came in higher. When I spoke with Julie today, we wanted to know what the biggest number would be, the most scary number that we could come up with. The most conservative estimate would be 1.7 million if you add in that 362 that the railroad wants us to pay for all these crossings. If we take the Canby X highest numbers and we add those to that railroad number, it's 1.7. We think that it'll get lower if we go out to bid. The railroad number won't get lower. If we go out to bid again in the winter, we think that because construction won't be going gangbusters, and because in wintertime it just traditionally the price lowers, and because now we have kind of they're going to try to do a slightly snappier presentation on selling it to outfits so that we don't just get one bid, we'll get hopefully multiple bids. We think that the bids will come in lower than the Canby X 1.326 million, so that it won't actually reach the 1.7 million. But when I asked the question to Julie, do we have the money to go to 1.7 million, which would be the worst case scenario ever? She said, actually, in the urban renewal, you would have the 1.7 million, and that it wouldn't change the actual payoff date. So worst case scenario, the urban renewal, we can pay it off in the same amount of time. All of that being known, we've already spent to date on this project $390,000. This year we paid $37,000, mostly in the engineering work. The engineer on this still has $18,000 left to spend, and I talked with her today and asked, are you going to ask for any more money, right? Because we're going back out to bid. And she said that she thinks with some cost saving that they're going to actually they think they can do their part that they bargained for the amount of money. So we won't have to spend any more on that. And there is, at the end, if we do get some savings, there's engineering work on the back end for construction support and inspection, and they would offer that at about $74,000. So all said and done, I think we can not only do this with the current URA funds that are available without extending that payoff date. And I think we can try to still value engineer this so that it isn't the scary 1.7. And in the end, we not only get, the quiet zone, we get an arch, and we get 3 super safe intersections for both pedestrians and cars that cross that railroad, and a ton of, obviously, Cambyites cross those. So it's not like we're throwing the money away. We're actually getting 3 safe intersections, an arch, and a lot less honking from the trains.
So, Joe.
Yes.
I remember way back when, and Councilor Parker and Councilor Dale, Councilor Hensley can remind me if I'm wrong. Did you remember this conversation of the quiet zone? I remember first initially the cost of this was going to be huge, like $1.5 million. And then it came down, it was like, oh, we're going to be able to do this for, $500,000. And here we are 4 short years later, and we're back up to $1.7 million.
You do have an arch in there now, though.
Okay, so I'm going to get to that in just a second.
Okay.
So, I mean, and we've already moved a power pole, or sorry, we didn't, but PGE did, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's done.
Great. And so I know that I'm sure we put some skin in that game as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I agree with you that it's a safety feature. I agree with you that it's something that is important, and it's been on our radar for 20 years to do or more. I guess we're at that point of, it's do or do not do. So my question is, so that there's that piece. Do you do it all in its entirety, quiet zones and arches, or do we peel the arch off and not do the arch and figure something else out? Use that money towards putting that arch on the logging trail bridge over 99 and put the money into that and make that project happen versus a Grant Street arch. Just as I'm putting it out there, as a conversation starter and as a thought.
And can I guess, talk about the conversation in terms of the railroad wants to know right now, their only answer, and the only answer you really would have to give me marching orders by consensus on, is whether I can tell the railroad, yeah, okay, you raised the price 95,000 for these 3, the equipment at 3 of these intersections. Is that okay for me to say, okay, we'll go ahead with a quiet zone? If the secondary question of, are we going to take the arch out? You can have that discussion later, because we aren't going out to bid yet until later this fall on the paving and the arch. And we could decide, or you could decide, whether or not you want to separate those at that time or not. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So the only real timely discussion or piece, just so you don't worry, because this would be a ton for me to bring to you and really confusing. I'm trying to paint the whole picture in what I still think can go forward if you still want the actual quiet zone. And then you can discuss later on, and we can even have a workshop about whether or not there's sentiment to either stick with the arch or pull that out of the project when we go out to bid.
Okay.
So if that helps.
It does. So I'm going to ask this question about that $48,000 a year in maintenance.
Yeah.
How much annually will that increase in perpetuity?
Well, I haven't seen how they're going to try to contract that. If, we could try to lock that in for a certain amount of time. I assume there's always a time value attached to money that, if it's worth 48,000 this year, that's probably going to go up 2.9% like inflation does. That would be a hard one for me to imagine that 10 years, 20 years from now, it's still going to be 48,000. So I imagine if you're talking in today's dollars, they're probably going to expect the same amount over time.
And so Joe, when do we have it to have our answer to them?
Initially, and I was just brought up to speed today with Maureen on the phone. Uh, they wanted it within 30 days. So if we want to sign off on this, it's been a couple of weeks. So it is one of those things. If you wanted to noodle this over, if you want to even create a special session, you could, or if uh, I, I'm pretty sure they don't want us to wait till the next meeting to say we at least want to still go forward with the quiet zone or not. And that's just the quiet zone piece, and that's just having the railroad do their part of it.
Okay, Councilor Barwick?
I think over the last several years, we've made a lot of investments in our downtown area, and it's starting to pay off at this point. There's a lot of activity. If you've been to Wayward recently, you'll see a lot of people hanging out outside of Wayward and Bee's Bake Shop, Gwynn's Coffee. I'm excited where our downtown is going. Where I don't get excited is when I'm sitting there having a glass of wine, trying to talk to some friends, and the train goes by and blares its horn. I'm in full support of the quiet zone. I don't love that costs are going up, but that's normal, I believe. And so I just think we need to continue moving forward with it and making it happen. If we can ask the question about the arch later, I love the arch idea, but if we can leave that out of it now while still saying we want to continue moving forward with the quiet zone, I say, my personal opinion is yes, let's continue moving forward with it.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Spoon, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I spend a lot of time downtown. I mean, maybe it's because I'm from here and I've lived here, but maybe the train just doesn't faze me as much as it phases some people because I grew up with it. I'm accustomed to it. But since I was not on council when this commitment was made, was there a commitment to Mary Hanlon in the Dahlia building that a quiet zone would be part of the package?
Councilor Parker?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Had a conversation recently with Mary Hanlon about this, and it was quite clear to her that part of the negotiations with Rick was that the city would pursue a quiet zone. And I think our vision is for further housing downtown. So we've already made a commitment that we're going to do this, and prices are growing up. And if we'd have done this earlier, maybe it would have been cheaper. So let's go ahead and get this done. And Joe, you've got 19 days until you need to sign that document, send it off to the Federal Railroad Administration. So actually, this is a two-track thing. We need to tell the Union Pacific that will pay the funds that they want from us.
Yes.
And secondly, we also need to forward the authorization on to the Federal Railroad officials. But
That's right.
Let's get this done.
Councilor Spoon, did you want to finish your comments?
Yes, thank you. So I feel like we made a commitment, long before I was on council to finish it. I'm really frustrated by the ongoing expenses, the $48,000 a year. I think it's ridiculous. I'm frustrated by it, but I guess it is what it is. And I feel like the city made a commitment, several years ago before Sean and I were around to make this happen. So I support it, but I will say, I think that perhaps the arch needs to be a decision for another time. I'm not excited about not doing the arch. I feel like that's something we committed to. I'm not excited about moving the arch to 99 because the actual value in the arch was to attract people to the downtown. I don't want to spend a couple of $100,000 on something that goes over Highway 99 for people that never intend to turn right or left. I'm not excited about spending that money. If we're going to spend the money on the arch, I think it needs to be on Grant Street because the whole purpose, like many arches regionally, was to attract people to our downtown. And if it's not going to do that, I'm not excited to spend the money on it. I would like to keep both projects moving forward. When we talked about the arch initially, a year and a half ago, a year ago. It was actually supposed to be done in August of this year. So that has come and passed, and we're now not even talking about maybe not even doing it. I'm perpetually frustrated by the lack of progress in general. I'm not excited about putting it on 99. If we want to make a decision about it later, that's fine, but I'm going to be incredibly frustrated if we tied these two projects together for efficiency, and then because the quiet zone took a prolonged period of time and expenses went up, we have to trash the project that was actually supposed to draw people downtown. That would be an incredibly frustrating process for me.
So, Councilor Spoon, to that point, we did tie those together for efficiency reasons. You know, that we were going to break ground one time and get it done all simultaneously. And yeah, I mean, the project has stretched out, not on our fault. You know, that's obviously, you know, that's, at least
Yeah.
I don't think it's our fault, you know. So, I mean, I agree with you that we take on projects all the time. There's plans, we have shelves full of plans that are to be done someday or looked at or changed. I mean, things change. We're looking at $1.7 million. That's a lot of dough. And I get that in a total package piece. I mean, I'll gladly have the dialogue about the arch another time. I do think that we need to move forward with the quiet zone. I'm not saying that piece. I think that we need to do that. So, I mean, I agree with everybody else.
I feel like our hands are tied on the quiet zone, to be honest, because we made a commitment, and we unfortunately made a commitment before we understood the expense. That was before my time. I don't know, you know, or we made a commitment at some point, but the expense has ever grown. And that commitment was made before I've been on council, and I've been on council almost 4 years now. At this point now, we've tied a relatively easy project to a complicated project. And now we're talking about trashing the easy project because the complicated project was too complicated. I'm just expressing frustration with the process because I feel like, you know, the whole sale on tying the two projects together was efficiency. And I don't feel like it's been more efficient. And now we're talking about discarding one. And I'm just expressing frustration. I think like a lot of citizens, you know, we've talked about something, we put a deadline out there, we say we're going to do it. And if we're not following through and we're not producing results, that's a problem. And I hear constituents, citizens saying that. I'm expressing that frustration. So clearly we need to move ahead with the quiet zone because we made a commitment to do it. I'm extremely frustrated by the ongoing maintenance expense. And I'm even more frustrated that we're talking about now throwing a good project away because the quiet zone has become more expensive than we anticipated.
That's fine. We'll untie the conversation to the two pieces, and we'll look at the quiet zone piece and whether or not to move forward or not. Fine, and that's great. I agree with you. I find the $48,000 of annual maintenance to be. I was a little bit of a punch in the gut today hearing that piece of it, because that's not factored into all of it. That's forever fee that we will pay on that aspect. So, again, we don't have a bottomless pit of money that we're going to have access to all the time. So we'll come back to the arts. That's fine.
Can I ask a question?
Well, can I finish my comments now? Thanks. Joe, I maybe would throw out to the group too, that's something that we spent tens of thousands of dollars on, wayfinding signs that no longer light up because we took out solar panels that don't work. Can we at least get something out of the $48,000 by tying those signs into this project so that they will light up for us?
Yeah, let me see what I can do about that. I know.
I mean, 48 grand at 3% a year. That seems like an easy tie-in for me to be able to get our, $100,000 wayfinding signs to our downtown lit up, at least along the railroad track there. I mean, that'll be my final piece on it. I'm just, it's been a frustrating endeavor, Councilor Spoon. It has been. And you're right, this is probably something that should have been done number of years ago. But as we all know, dealing with ODOT and dealing with Union Pacific is not always an easy process. Did you have something else you wanted to say, Councilor Spoon?
No, I mean, if I'm just being honest, we're talking about an extraordinary amount of money, and I feel like, you know, we made a commitment to do it, and I'm willing to uphold that commitment. But I mean, I don't hear people coming to council asking for a quiet zone. I don't hear like what's the value really? Can we have a conversation about the value to the community at $1.7 million for a quiet zone?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I don't know. You talk about the commitment piece, and I think I'll hang on to the words of Councilor Parker, is that we will make, I think you said we'll make a concerted effort to make that a reality, right? Is that what was the agreement there that between Mary and the Dahlia Project and Rick was our goal or a concerted effort is to have a quiet zone. Well, now at $1.7 million, that's still, hey, we've given it the good college try. I don't know. That's the question before us, you know. And to your point, Councilor Spoon, I suppose as the next couple of days go on, please, throw out on social media what people think about quiet zones and watch the feedback come in. I think you'll find that there's still quite a pent up desire to have a quiet zone in Canby.
Yeah, for sure. I've had the conversations. I guess maybe my ask is for a special session. I feel like this is a huge ask for us to have this information dropped and to make a decision to move forward. I understand that the state doesn't want us to wait until the next meeting, but I don't know. It's a big ask to have the information drop and make a decision in 20 minutes about $1.7 million and what that means for the future of our downtown. Is it impossible to have a special session so that we can gather more information? And
what additional information do you need Joe to bring back?
I guess with all due respect, I'd just like to think about it for longer than 10 minutes about whether or not I want to spend $1.7 million on a quiet zone and maybe not do the arch. This is a conversation we've been having for years. And to have it come up during communications and then make a decision is, I think, a big ask for the community.
We're untying both of those pieces. It's whether or not do we move forward with the project, the quiet zone. That's what we're deciding.
Can I ask or maybe add a little bit? We currently have budgeted with the URA this year, this fiscal year, $1,025,000 for the quiet zone and an additional $216,900 for the arch. So the difference is $500,000. So you guys were committed and put it in a budget to actually do this at 1.2 and change. What has changed is ODOT Rail took too long to get back to us because there was a retirement and somebody else didn't respond, and then they finally get back to us. And I'd like to actually thank Greg Parker for, I think, pushing that along for us. So we finally got a response from ODOT Rail, and then the federal or the Union Pacific finally gets back to us and raises their amounts per intersection on their putting in the protective lighting and the gates that they need to do given today's costs. So that went up 95,000. We went back and forth with Canby X because we only had one bidder and it seemed so high. It seemed much higher than you guys were willing to budget the 1.2 million. There is room when we go back out to bid for our construction to maybe again try to find efficiencies, maybe again try to value engineer and bring that price down. Also, the time, if there's more than one bidder, capitalism usually sees a cheaper price. And the other thing is during the time of year that we usually see a cheaper price. So I'm hopeful that the 1.2 and change that you guys already have, we don't so far exceed that it's such a gut-wrenching decision. So I'm not trying to come in with 20 minutes and say, how about a quiet zone for 1.7. What we're really saying is the whole overall sticker price at a most conservative estimate would be 1.7, and the URA budget can still stomach that and pay itself off in the same timeline. So I wanted to bring you the sticker shock news with the idea that that should be the cap. And the problem is the railroad added $95,000 to their 3 parts, and then they added another $48,000 per year. So that's essential news. I think it needs to be brought to you. But really, I mean, if you're breaking it down, you're deciding, do you tell the railroad to go ahead for 95,000 more and give me permission to type them back and say, yeah, we'll do that part. We'll reimburse you that part. And then the further piece of that is, will we then commit to 48,000 a year for the ongoing maintenance fee of 3 intersections? So if that helps kind of flesh out what the decision is tonight, because the overall question of 1.7, that's a huge question, but I thought we had already budgeted for 1.2 million. Does that help?
I hear what you're saying, Joe, and I appreciate that. I mean, we budgeted 1.2 for 2 projects though, so it's easy to say we're only adding 500,000. The reality is we're taking 200,000 out if we're separating the arch and the railroad, and we're adding $700,000. And let me be clear, I'm not against the quiet zone. I want both projects. My concern is, if I'm being really honest, that we're going to separate the 2 and the arch will get killed later. If we're going to do it, let's just do both projects.
1.7 is with the arch in it.
I'm not interested in separating them because I think the reality is that we're going to get well, then in a month from now or 2 months from now, we're going to talk about how the quiet zone was more expensive than we expected. We're going to kill the arch. Then we're going to be talking about a welcome to Canby over 99. And that does nothing to direct business to our downtown businesses in any capacity. So I want to do both projects. I'm not interested in separating them. I'm certainly not interested in spending that amount of money to not actually direct more business downtown.
Councilor Varga, you were waving your hand there. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, Joe, 2 questions. Do we have a list of what that $48,000 a year will be spent on? I guess 3 questions. B, is it negotiable at all? And then C was something else, and I forget what C was. I'll have to come back to it.
I was told by the engineer who spoke with the railroad personnel is that the railroad is trying to now basically just implement, it is a maintenance fee per intersection where there's quiet zones, just to basically maintain the lights and the equipment that they put in special for them. And it really doesn't, it's just their choice, and they're going to withhold allowing a quiet zone if we don't continue to pay it. So it didn't seem negotiable. It seems like a top-down, take it or leave it sort of thing. And I'm not happy about it, but that was basically what the railroad told our engineer.
Okay, I remembered the third part. You're saying that 1.7 million is going to be worst case scenario, correct? It could come in below that?
Yes.
Okay, so we could be saying it could be 1.7. We might actually come back in if we go back out to bid at the exact numbers that we've been talking about for a couple of years, right? Yeah. It's feasible that could happen.
I used the numbers, the highest number that Canby X came in with before they reduced it with some strings attached. So that's how I got that number, was the one bid that we got that seemed really egregiously high. That's how I got the 1.7 million with the new fees now put in by the railroad, and the extra high on the arch as well. So that was the highest bid we've ever received on the arch and the highest bid we've ever received on the intersections. And then now the new high number from the railroad, and that was 1.7 million. Perfect. So yeah, I'm hopeful that in the winter time, with more competitive bidders, that we might come in under that.
Okay,
I'm just trying to bring kind of the worst news to you guys so that you can make the decision on whether or not we still want to do this or not.
Okay, any other comments? So So an alternative piece put out on the table by Councilor Spoon to take this and revisit it at another meeting next week and try to get this hashed out. Does that anyone else interested in having that piece, or is there a decision can be made tonight?
Well, Mr. Mayor, my read of the council is that we're not at the point where we're disappointed, we're ticked off at the incremental cost from the railroad, but I'm not hearing any of us say that that kills the quiet zone. And so my nervousness is around going ahead and making those time constrained commitments to the, I can't remember the acronyms, Greg, to the federal authority and to the railroad.
All right, so you're for just pressing forward and moving forward with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is possible, within my understanding of the authority of the National Railroad Authority, that the fee that we seem to be hung up on, which is mouse nuts compared to the big number of this annual fee, that there is room for negotiations and also involvement with federal officials. So I'd like us to keep an eye on the Canby that we're trying to build, and keep an eye on a commitment that we made, and to proceed with it. We need to sign the document. Joe, that needs to get off by the 21st to National Railroad. And there's still room to negotiate with Union Pacific. They are not, once, according to the Assistant Director of the Oregon Department of Transportation, that once you sign that document and send it to the National Railroad Association, they review it for sufficiency on whether it has met all of the checklist. And if so, they approve the quiet zone. Union Pacific does not approve the quiet zone. We are required to pay Union Pacific for the cost incurred in installing things. Whether that yearly maintenance fee is included within any language that now exists with the National Railroad Authority is something that we can explore.
Councilor Varwig, are we tabling this for another couple of days next week or moving forward?
I can go either way on it. I want to move forward on it. I want the quiet zone, so I'd like to push forward with it.
So it seems like the consensus then, the greater consensus is to move forward with this. Is that what am I?
Mayor, did we lose a counselor?
Yes, Councilor Hensley was having technical difficulties and had to get off. Okay, radio silence, y'all. So are we moving? So I'm going to say, based on this conversation, that the concept of holding on another week to have this conversation is not the wishes of the council right now, that it's to move forward with Joe signing the paperwork and getting this on process and getting it to the decision makers.
Yes, but in no way does this decision at all impact the council's previous commitment to the Arch. That is something that we are going to discuss, and this in no way authorizes us to talk about a Arch over 99. That right now, at least the record is that we still support an Arch.
Yeah, right now, yeah, this is purely about moving the quiet zone forward. And again, like I said, I threw the Arch out there as a conversation piece because that's, you know, again, dollars and cents, trying to keep it, you know, the Arch has doubled in price as well. So, you know, these are things that, again, this is why we are elected to be in this position. So, all right. So, Joe, it seems that we are moving forward with the Arch, the quiet zone piece, and this as is, and let's get it signed and keep it moving.
Okay, so yeah, what I'll do is I'll call the engineer and make sure that everyone's on the same page, and we'll sign those documents. And what that will be a commitment to for now is that we will reimburse the railroad for their equipment and lights that they install at each 3 of those intersections. And what that does then is allows us to know that we can go back out to bid in a couple of months and hopefully get a better bid on what you guys can later determine what the full scope of that project is. And that's just to reiterate what I'm hearing.
Yes, sir. That's what you're hearing.
Okay.
Thank you. What else do you have under city administrator and business?
Okay. Thank you for asking. So Jerry showed me, and I went to it. There was a link that he shared that there's a virtual workshop, and it's put on by the county, and it has to do with our Ivy Street project. And so when you go to the drop-down menus, there's under project descriptions, there's both a 2D kind of schematic of the plans that they are planning to do for Ivy Street. And then there's actually a 3-minute flyover video, which is kind of snazzy, and it has you kind of up and down and in and out looking at what the roadway is going to be, and it's kind of nice. And so what we're planning on doing is having a link on our Facebook webpage as well as our website so that people can see what the county is planning to do on Ivy Street for us. So that's, I think, good news. And other than that, I was just chatting with Gordon as our power, we had technical difficulties here in the front end of our meeting, and we've had those a couple of times. And so what we're going to try to do is, he was telling me that in broadcasting, sometimes redundancy is the safer way to go. And so there is a mechanism in there that he thinks is failing. And so we're going to be trying to look into whether or not we can buy a second one of those using PEG fees, because that is a pot of money that we don't always tap into and that we're allowed to, so that we can be redundant enough that we won't lose power and have technical difficulties anymore. So I'm going to be pursuing that in this week as well.
So this is one of those cases where government redundancy is okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Joe, I'm going to ask the question. Is there anything else? Oh, wait. Councilor Varwig.
Joe, would you do me a favor and email me the link to that flyover? I am sure I could find it on the county website, but if you guys have it right there, I would really appreciate maybe if you could send that out to the whole council, that would be great.
I will forward it to you. I got it forwarded to me by Jerry, and then we'll make sure that it gets up on our websites so that everybody can see it.
Groovy. All right. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask the question because it's on the agenda. It's our second opportunity for citizen input. Is there anyone there of the citizen nature that wants to opine on anything we've talked about this evening?
There is not.
Fantastic. Melissa, will you take us through action review, please?
All right, you have approved the consent agenda, approved resolution 1341, adopted ordinance numbers 1533, 1534, 1535, 1536, and 1537, and passed ordinance number 1538 to a second reading on September 16th. You've also approved findings, conclusions, and order for Redwood Landing 2 annexation and appointed Joseph Lindsay as interim city administrator.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate that. Appreciate all of everyone's conversation this evening and hard work. It's been a while since we've had quite the long meeting like this. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Great. Motion's been made. Council President Dale seconds it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for looking up. Appreciate it. We are out. 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, Canby. Have a great night.